after Christmas. On Tuesday. So I just bought lunches. It's a good, like, a super.
Barry might be a little late because of meeting right now.
Oh, okay. So we should start without. There.
And we're live from Lancaster City Hall.
Okay, we're going to get started.
Whoa, that is loud today.
So everybody in there have their seat. Mr. Harris, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Carter.
Here.
Mrs. Bird. Mrs. Hill.
Present.
Mrs. Spencer.
Here.
Mrs. Nice.
Here.
Mr. Golden. Mr. Grant.
Here.
Mrs. Ruffin.
Here.
Chairman Adams.
Here. Do we have a quorum?
We do.
Got one more. Okay, so we have a quorum. We are now in session. First order of business is approval of the minutes from our last meeting. All received a copy of them. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a second. Are there any changes, corrections, additions? Hearing none, any objections to approving the minutes as written? Hearing none, so be it. Minutes are approved. Next order of business, report from the chair. Thankfully, I have nothing to report. So we're moving on to public comments. Thank you all for being here this evening. We have part in the beginning and the end for public comments, so if you would like to make any sort of statement to the commission, please come up to the lectern. Make sure it's on.
Oh, that's different. Just going to check it, make sure.
Every time I think, why didn't I check that first? Please give us your name and the street on which you live, and if you would, please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
A lot of different things.
So, would anybody like to speak?
John Gavea, 100 block of East Orange, and you know I wouldn't attend these meetings if I didn't have something to say. In reading that the discussion has become in earnest the last few weeks over whether city council should be elected by district or citywide, and everyone here knows my feelings, but I'm going to say them again anyway. I'd rather they be elected citywide. I think if you're going to have an effective city government, there's got to be a certain element of trust. And if we're going to have to break things down where we have representatives coming from each particular neighborhood, that doesn't exactly lend that to, in my humble opinion. I'm under the impression that the city council is something like a board of directors. They're not just a bunch of independent contractors. They're people who are supposed to be acting on the common good. And that's the primary reason why I'd like to see us continue to have city council elected on a citywide basis rather than by neighborhood. The other point here, as everyone knows, I want to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball and we do fiscal reform in the way of earned income tax. As many of you, or some of you anyway, know, I'm 81 years old, which makes me a senior citizen. I'm also a renter. I've heard an argument lately that the city is doing this to benefit the landlords. I rent from Eklund, and I am sure that Eklund, like every other landlord, when he gets that tax bill, whether it's an increase, if there's an increase, he passes that along to me and all the other renters, whether they're senior citizens or not. An earned income tax, yes, there are people who are working are going to pay it. I only work a little bit, so I'm not going to pay much. And most seniors are that way. If you want to do something to make sure that you're benefiting the senior citizen homeowners, which I've heard a lot about, we'll go for the earned income tax. At the same time, let's be sure that there's a cap on that. I'm not talking about a bottom line, I'm talking about top line cap percentage, because we don't want to chase the workers out of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Any other public comments?
Hey everyone, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, first of all, thank you commissioners for all the work you all have put in and to everyone else supporting this effort.
Name and street.
Oh, sorry, Marshall Miller, I am on the 700th block of 6th Street in the Southwest Quadrant. Thank you to the commissioners and everyone supporting this effort. I know it's a lot of time and I appreciate you hearing us out. I'm also here to speak my concerns about the districting effort that's being folded into the discussions around the new charter. I think that the primary concern of everyone that I speak to about this charter is around the taxation issue and solving the city's financial woes. The districting proposals that have been put forward, I think, are interesting, but I don't think they're fully fleshed out yet. And I think that they need more time, and I think that voters shouldn't be put in a position where they have to make a decision about districts and the financial well-being of the city at the same time. If folks want to pursue the district endeavor, I would recommend that we push that off till later when it is, in my understanding, they can do a referendum and let voters decide on that separately. So I don't know why we're risking the full charter and confusing that or delaying the process and potentially costing the city money and losing city services when we can move forward quickly with a clean charter that directly addresses the concerns that we elected this commission to solve. Also, over in Wrightsville, there was just an article published in the LMP that showed that it's going to cost them about $20,000 to apportion their districts over there, and adding new city councilors to the 7 we have right now will cost the city additional dollars in terms of benefits. So in a financial crisis, I'm not sure why we're looking at expanding the budget when we need to save property taxpayers money. So I strongly recommend that you all consider moving forward with a charter that doesn't address districts, and folks who want to look at districts should look at getting support for a ballot referendum later down the line. And yep, that's everything I have. Thank you all.
Thank you. Any other comments? Please.
Hi, my name is Katharina Solos. I live in Lancaster City on St. Joseph Street, and I've attended a few homeroom commission meetings, and I really appreciate the work that you all have put in over the last month. It's extraordinary. I also am concerned about the financial position of the city. As I said before, I grew up in New York in New York City in the 70s, and as a child lived through bankruptcy and the effects it had on public education, city services, and it took a decade and a half, maybe more, depending, to come out of that. I worked in Asia during the Asian monetary crisis. A lot of companies, a lot of municipalities, well, the whole nation suffered. And then I worked at the Department of the Treasury after our own financial crisis in 2008, 2009. So these things are real. It's very real to me as a resident and a property owner in Lancaster City, which has so much history and so many wonderful attributes, that we stay focused and be thankful that City Hall started this process. It would be irresponsible to stumble into essentially bankruptcy and to let all city services suffer along the way, and many bad, unpredictable things I think will happen if that happens. So it's a real responsibility to stand up and face the financial needs of the city, and understand that, you know, there are a lot of constraints based on Pennsylvania law. And with respect to districting, I think we need no more discussion, because I really want to understand the problem we're trying to solve. And districts raise a lot of issues. If you ended up with 1/4 of city council elected by a quadrant, and the voter participation historically in that quadrant is down, we have to understand why voter participation is down and who's being disenfranchised. There are a lot of layers here which I think need more work. And really to, you know, really be frank, again, about what are the issues we're trying to solve. And I don't think, based on what I've heard and meetings I've attended, think that we're there yet. It's not to say that there aren't real issues, but that I don't think we're really addressing it, whereas the financial issues are right in front of us, and we know what we can do and what we need to do. So again, thank you for your work.
Thank you. Please.
Hello. Oh, that's close. My name is Taylor Poff. I'm on Church Street in Lancaster City. I'm a homeowner. I'm a special education teacher in our district. I am also a landlord of 2 rental properties in this city. And so I've been really passionate about the home rule, and I just wanted, I'm a teacher, so I had to write it down, and then I'll go from there if that's okay for me to read it. But I'll just be very honest. I'm a little frustrated when I voted for the Home Rule Commission, thinking that it was helping to keep things affordable in the city, and things keep going up, and I'm working my best as a landlord to keep things affordable, and I thought I was voting for that to continue and for things to be solved related to property taxes. And I'm frustrated that it seems to become about districting all of a sudden. So I voted for one thing, it's becoming another. As a local teacher, I also really know that property taxes are really important to keeping people in this city. If they continue to go up, I'm worried that the city will become less affordable, and it's already in a moment of crisis, and I thought we were trying to set up to help solve part of that crisis. As a landlord, I'm doing my best to keep rent affordable, and my concern is that if the property taxes increase because we don't pass everything we need to in time, then I'm worried that the affordable housing crisis will continue to grow. And I don't know if a city as small as ours should be focused on districting when we need to focus on the people we already have who need continued support and helping to keep the cost of living affordable in the city. So my request is that the city and this committee put aside the districting side quests and really focus on helping us to fix the budget so that we can prevent property taxes from going up. Again, I'm quite frustrated that in this process, we're politicizing this charter and making it about who's on city council instead of what I thought I voted for, which was a home rule process to keep property taxes down, keep city services going, continuing to make this city affordable both for renters and for homeowners. So I'm just asking that we please stay the course to avoid the districting process. If you want me to vote yes for that, put it somewhere else, and I'll probably vote yes for that. But right now, we need to stay the course. We need to keep focused on passing this charter to avoid issues long-term. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, thank you all very much. Moving on to item 6, deliberations on form of government. Without objection, I'd like to move to a committee of the whole with the purpose of working through the articles that we were provided drafts of and allow Mr. Cross and Mr. Reddick to take over the chair to moderate these. Any objection? Okay, hearing none. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did distribute the first drafts of some of the more technical articles, and we'll get to that, but I think we have some open business left on petition and referendum, specifically, which Fred has up there. Specifically, there was a indecision on the agenda item, whether it should be a special meeting or an agenda item. In the draft that we will be circulating after tonight, you haven't made that decision, but right now, what we've put in the draft is that the petition committee itself can decide whether they want it before a special meeting or an agenda, rather than this commission deciding, because you were split.
Yep.
So our thinking was that's rightfully a petition committee, how they want to treat the issue, rather than us deciding so if you all can live with that, we can have that draft language maintained.
So that means the citizens who are requesting a special meeting or a particular agenda item are the ones who decide that they want it to be
Right.
just on the agenda of the next meeting, or they want a special.
Right, it'll be specified in the
I like
petition,
that solution.
so people signing it will know what they're signing for,
Yeah,
rather than us limiting people's choice in the future.
yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I like that.
All right, so that was one open item. The other open items, and Fred, if I missed an open item, let me know. It's, we have the
You
days,
guys need the link.
the,
That one, I don't think that was in the folder.
we'll have it up here.
Back here.
Well, we have it from the last meeting, so,
You want to come over here?
hold on, I might have a
If I
copy.
email you the
Yes,
link. Would that help?
Thank you.
I might have a copy here.
I just printed everything that was sent, and that was not.
I may or may not, I have a lot from the last meeting.
She's got it.
She have it? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, we got it.
Good, okay.
John gave it to her.
All right, it's 11:04. We've now named the chapters too, so it's now Article 11, and it is Section 04, which is the requirements for petition for initiating ordinances. This is where the citizens can ask for direct an ordinance to be put before council and council action, and if council doesn't act, citizens can take it to referendum. The decision that was made for the agenda was to use the total of the mayoral votes of the last mayor's election at 3%, which is a lower bar for agenda placing. The decision tonight is how much higher, if you want to go higher, or where do you want to land with the percentage of mayoral votes for a more significant activity, which is actually putting an ordinance in.
So to get on the agenda or have a special meeting of council, it's 3%?
3%, that's what 3%, 45 days.
All right, I think it should be higher for the referendum.
And what did we decide, what did we calculate this 3%?
Oh, that I don't have that. We were guessing that. I don't
I
have
just want to
that.
know relative.
I thought we had said 3% to have a special meeting or agenda item, but 10% for
10% to
referendum.
get an agenda. Yeah.
Well, no, I thought you were asking how many does that represent?
Yeah, I was asking, but just so we know.
I don't remember. Does anybody remember, was there 8,000 votes? It seems to be in my head that it was a total of 8,000 votes for mayor?
6,000 and change.
Huh?
6,000.
6,000? So you'd be 180 signatures roughly? At 3% for agenda item, at 5%, you'd have 300 and some?
I think to initiate.
10% is
Initiate an ordinance,
600?
we should be looking at a significant,
Yeah.
larger number.
What is it in third-class city code?
20? And it's a much shorter time.
And you have to come in.
And you have to come to City Hall.
To sign, you
Yeah.
can't circulate.
No one can circulate petitions under the third-class code. It's really a strict
Yeah.
regimen. You have to have it at City Hall. The city clerk has to stay there till 7 o'clock, I think.
Yeah,
And people have to actually come to City Hall to sign it.
right, so we're suggesting,
We're suggesting citizens themselves can go out and address it. Yeah, and have a longer time instead of, was it 15 days?
yeah, I think you're right, I remember 10% from our last meeting.
So 10% is about 600 signatures.
Is that adequate? I guess the question is that adequate to put, we're talking about initiating an ordinance,
Yeah, well, putting it before the council.
so putting it before the
Yeah,
council.
actually, right.
Yeah.
And then potentially going to referendum, special election.
Commission is interested, there were 6,161 votes.
6,161, Tim?
Thank you.
Thank you, that's helpful. That's total.
Mayoral election.
That's total, thank you.
Correct.
Currently, it's 3% for either an agenda item or a special meeting.
Right. And that has no guaranteed outcome. It's simply, the council must address it.
And
There's no,
And the proposal on the table is 10% for an ordinance or referendum.
an ordinance be put before council
Right.
for their action. If their action doesn't pass the ordinance, the citizens can then request a referendum. So you're making citizens a step above, equal with the council and the legislative powers.
So I think 10% sounds actually quite generous.
So I'm wondering if that's too low.
That was my one thought. I mean, I can live with 10%, but like I said, 10% is 600 signatures.
Should be higher.
To make law,
What do you
to effectively make law, yes.
think it should
20.
be? You think it should be 20?
Well, it's 20 now, but it's only 15 days. So you've already done 45 days for the agenda item.
Yeah, okay,
So you can increase the window of time.
yeah,
Effectively, 1,000 signatures in 45 days.
yeah.
I think that sounds
And that
very
would put
reasonable.
something on a referendum.
No, that would put it before council. That would put an ordinance, an actual ordinance written as part of the petition before council for their consideration,
And then if council,
up or down.
Up or down.
Right.
what's the next step?
If they refuse to do it, then the citizens can request a referendum. In other words,
It
put
does
it to,
create
put it to the
possibility of a
But that-
referendum
but
at the same
that's
time.
if they down it.
Yeah, you would circulate the petition at that point
Right.
to put it on a referendum.
You have to circulate again?
You have to circulate again?
no, once it's done, it's,
No.
you can request.
You
a
circulate
Yeah, I thought it was
first,
automatic. I thought it was
then you
automatic.
give it to council,
Right.
If they say up, it becomes law and an ordinance.
Right.
If they say no, then it goes to referendum.
Right. So
Automatic.
that's why I think that number needs to be higher.
Right,
Yeah.
I agree with you, yeah.
And
Yeah, I
how
would-
much time are we giving for?
45 days.
Yeah, so then I think it's okay to make it higher if we have more time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think if we're extending the time, if we're eliminating the clause of, and allowing it to be circulated by others,
Yeah, you don't have to come
so
into
we're
City
already
Hall.
making it easier that way, we're making it easier with the time limit. I think to put it to 20% seems like a reasonable number, just to make sure that it's,
And that's for a special meeting and
No.
then.
No, special meeting is still the lower bar. The lowest bar is special
It's
meeting.
just a referendum.
Lowest bar, a special meeting or agenda is 180 votes,
180, right.
right now.
I'm okay with that.
With
Yeah.
20%.
20,
Yeah,
I like the
20%, the extended time, and the citizen circulation of petitions.
I say, I vote
Yep.
yes to that.
Good with that?
Consensus on that? We're all good?
Consensus.
Yes,
There is?
All right.
easily.
The next,
Yes.
I do want to raise a question to the commission, though. So this has come up because I think recently we've had some conversations as a public about specific issues. Would we be amenable to allowing residents also put essentially resolutions of some kind to state positions of the public of the city? Because I think that people having the ability to vote on specific social issues but not having necessarily a legislative impact is something that could be valued. And potentially remove some politicization of the levels of government from city council.
I have to ask, I have no idea what you mean.
So I'll be specific.
What problem are we trying to
Yes,
solve?
what,
We had a city council, so we had several city council meetings recently where the subject of a ceasefire in Gaza came about. And the rooms were packed every time. I think they went on for multiple, like 2 hours apiece, I think, but I could be wrong about the time frame. But just in my view, I feel like those are the sort of sentimental statements that it's more impactful for residents to vote on as opposed to the city government having to take charge there, especially when we're talking about issues that the city government doesn't necessarily have an impact in. Like there are statements that we as a public can make but don't necessarily impact our local government. So I think that there should be the ability for residents to have a process to state their views on those issues without necessarily feeling I have to come to city council every time I want to see something chained up the ladder.
yeah,
We can do that already
I'm,
anytime they want. People can circulate their ideas.
yeah, we can put a soapbox in Mulberry Park
Yeah.
and you can stand up and talk all you want.
I don't think we should give the citizens the right to speak for the city in that manner. I think if people want
Why?
to speak as individuals, which people do plenty of times, and there's plenty of, petitions out there that thousands of people sign, and everyone has a right to do that at any time. And I think that's not part of what home rule is trying to solve for.
Logistically, my challenge is for the particular issue you just brought up, those folks would have to wait until November to vote. And then what are they, is that a valuable, are folks going, they want an action immediately. So they did what our democracy is sets out in guidelines. They came to city council, they voiced their opinion, they packed the room, they organized, they got people here, and they got city council to take action in a particular way.
And
No, I
I'd say
agree with that.
there's a path for a version of that by the 3% alternative to get something as an agenda item
That's a
or
good
as a
point.
special meeting. Yeah,
Oh,
like
yeah,
it can be,
that's a good
it can be put on an agenda in a timely fashion with 180
Whether it's a
people.
resolution or an ordinance.
Right. No, I don't disagree with all those things. I think I just take a look at it a little bit differently from, what you had said, like the city government. I think you said the people speaking for the city government. And the way I saw it was actually opposite. The city government is speaking for the sum total of the people, and it might be more valuable to public discourse to know how many people support certain issues.
Yeah.
So that's where I was coming from on the matter, and I said I would raise it here, so I wanted to raise it.
Okay, is there anything else?
Yeah, I think we've resolved that.
Well, we
have
have one
resolved
more item to decide.
Oh.
Same issue, it's reconsideration essentially the same idea. This is for existing ordinances or ordinances passed by the council. The citizens would have the ability to opine, I guess, on an ordinance they don't particularly like, and they can request reconsideration of the council of that ordinance. And that would follow the same process. You have to petition, you have to put it in front of the council to reconsider it, and repeal it rather, in council.
Or
It could be
amend.
amended, repeal or amend it, yeah, appeal or amend it. And if neither of those occur, the petitioners have the ability to ask for that question to go to the referendum. So it's essentially the same power as we gave for ordinance consideration. This is just the backside of it.
So what are you asking us to decide?
The days and
Same
the percent
20%.
of the mayoral vote.
Yeah, I think
Oh.
the same.
I think it should be the same.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I agree.
I do have some pause there because there are certain ordinances that take effect immediately, such as ordinances related to public safety. And so I would actually be more interested in lowering the threshold of time and percentage for reconsideration, only because in certain instances, ordinances do, like I said, take impact immediately, so swifter action may be required if the citizens feel so.
Suspended. Ordinances are suspended for the period of time it takes for reconsideration to occur. So you have to give the citizens time to form the petitioners committee and put the city on notice that there's going to be a petition filed. And I forget the
And then
time.
once they're on notice.
It's
then
a suspension of the
is
ordinance.
Suspended.
Right, but there are ordinances that are off limits to both consideration and initiative.
Right.
So those are spelled out in the, in this section that you all
It's the
have.
suspension period I'm speaking more to, because there are certain types of ordinances under the current third-class city code that don't get the same luxury of a suspension, even if a petition is cycled.
Yeah, well, we are, where's the suspension section? I can't see it. 1107? There it is.
Where
And 1102 is the ordinances that are
shall be
not,
suspended from going into operation within 75 days after its initial, so it's 75-day period of suspension? Confused.
yeah.
So-
There's two different components.
Yeah.
So if there's a newly enacted ordinance, there's a 75-day period during which, if the right number of people create the petition, then that ordinance will then be suspended. For an ordinance that's been already adopted and in effect, that suspension period doesn't exist.
It's over, right.
Okay. The
But
suspension
you
period
can
is
apply the
for,
referendum process to either of those two situations. The 75-day period is applying, so, city passes an ordinance that's supposed to take effect to do X, Y, and Z. Within 75 days of its passage, if the citizens follow the procedure for setting up referendum, and they give the proper notice, then the effect of that ordinance will be suspended until the referendum election is.
okay, and proper notice is just saying, is.
They have to file with the clerk, the five,
They don't have to have all the. they
No,
don't have
the
to have all the
petitioners
system-
committee.
Right,
right, 5 people have to get together and form a petitioners committee, present it to the clerk saying, we are representing a petition effort,
okay.
and we are going to go out and collect signatures with other people's help.
Okay, so the suspension time is longer
It
than
would be,
the collection
Yeah.
of signatures.
because there's a certain period of time that the petitioners committee can be formed.
Right,
Once that passes, it's assumed there's no, but you still have to give time for another petitioners committee to form.
and that is only if the ordinance has just been passed, not something that's already on the books.
Right, because they're in effect already and they've been enforced. But you can reconsider those.
You can reconsider them, but you won't have the same time, you won't have the same.
It won't be
You won't
suspended.
get an automatic suspension. It will
Yeah.
be staying in effect until the referendum
Right.
is actually.
You said there are some exceptions to that. Can
What
you
is it?
give us a sense of what those exceptions are?
That's 1102. 1102 is the limitations.
1102 is
Darlene knows.
the new ordinance. 1107 is the reconsideration.
And the only thing off limits on reconsideration.
So I just want to read something from the third-class city code as to where I'm coming from, why I just raised this up. It is under reconsidering ordinances by electors. I don't have the certain, I'll just go with it. Ordinances for the this is where there may be some concern with the suspension, like as it sits right now, which is why I just want to clarify the extent to which these exceptions take effect in a potential charter. Because right here it says ordinances for the preservation of public peace, health, morals, safety, and in the exercise of the police powers of the city government, and for the prevention and abatement of nuisances, is just an example there. These are things that it seems that they take effect regardless of a reconsideration being in place. So I just want to clarify whether it's going to be a full encompassing suspension or if we are making exceptions.
The exceptions are outlined in 1102.
What page is that?
That is page 1 to 2.
1102A. That's what the limitations on petition and referendum.
Okay.
Budget ordinance for general fund, capital, other funds, tax levies and fees.
I think we're okay with that.
Highlighted sections are the exceptions.
That's definitely more open than it currently sits, so okay.
That's more than what the third class city code.
I would say so.
I would note,
So-
I would just note that this section actually went through a legal review with me before it was submitted to you. The ones that are here by exception, you really have no choice but to accept these because you're actually impacting, in most cases, private property owners' rights.
Okay.
So that's the distinguishing feature. The item that you referred to, Mr. Baster, that was in the third class city code, there's a rationale that was behind that for the third class city code, and I'll just tell you the reason that was there, and it's not here, but the reason that was there is if you have a nuisance situation that's causing health problems and you have to wait for a lengthy period of time, the health of your city could be impacted.
Sure.
But, the concept of leaving it at least out of the charter doesn't mean that in the administrative code, there couldn't be something dealt with those. These are absolute exceptions.
Okay.
The referendum, the ones that are here are ones that I don't think you have any choice but to legally include.
Gotcha. Okay. I can accept that. Thank you.
Okay, so
Can I ask one question about, so in that exceptions or limitations section, it provides an exception for an ordinance fixing the salaries of elected city officials. Why would we allow elected city officials to modify their salary and prohibit citizens from repealing that?
So if you keep in mind, there's another provision of this charter that's already going to deal with the compensation of elected and appointed of officials, and it ties into the budget process. You'll note that they can't change their own compensation, so it can only go into effect for somebody coming in the next term. So the concept there is they can't change their current salary. It would only be in the future. And that should be as part of the budgetary process. So you would essentially be going back into the budget and putting referendum on budget, which is a problem.
Okay, thank you.
all right, so I've got reconsideration at 20%, 45 days. Sold?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. I think
Okay, sold. And I think those are the only items subject to Fred's review that I have marked down as open, Fred? Okay. Now, we'd like to move,
Yes.
go ahead, Ms. Burke.
Yeah, I had some questions about, the proposed ordinance in Title 7.03.
Well, we're not there yet.
Oh,
Ordinances, we're going to go through that, yeah.
Oh.
No, we're going to, I want to go through the articles that are on the agenda, and then we'll get to that. That's going to be the third one, okay? All right, Fred, you're the general. All right, give us a second to organize.
this was the meeting on the agenda.
Yes, go ahead.
Next section we're talking about are general powers. This is a very broad statement that provides a liberal level of authority to the city under home rule and basically indicates that the grant of power given to the city is very broad, and they're able to perform any function that is not denied by either the United States Constitution or the Pennsylvania Constitution or an act of the General Assembly or by this charter. It's a relatively short section, but it gives the city basically the home rule authority, the broad exercise of responsibility and powers.
It's the flexibility.
I mean, ultimately, this is the crux of
It
what
is.
home rule establishes.
Correct.
That opens everything up to whatever's
This is
not
Dillon's
prohibited.
law and practice.
Right, okay.
Correct.
Yep.
Dillon's rule. All right.
Okay. Any questions on that article?
So on 1.05 construction, when we talk about if any provisions of this charter shall be judged by any court or competent jurisdiction, what do you mean by competent jurisdiction?
That's a severability clause where if,
Competent jurisdiction is what she's asking.
The county.
Oh, I'm
state.
sorry.
Yeah, so competent jurisdiction is the court vested with the authority to handle the decision. So, for example, the starting point for a challenge here in Lancaster would be the Court of Common Pleas of Lancaster County. Possible other courts that could hear it might include the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. In some cases, very limited, there are certain rights that can go directly to the Supreme Court. And then if it involves a federal matter, could have the federal district courts of Pennsylvania. Those would be the courts of competent jurisdiction
Right.
generally related to this.
Right.
Sorry for that.
that's okay.
Yeah, specifically.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
boundaries stay the same.
And I had, okay, that's all for general.
I mean, I read some
Yeah.
of the cohort cities. This was pretty typical.
You want to
So,
make them
Yeah,
powerful enough to do the work of the citizen.
yeah,
Right.
that's
Okay.
fine.
All right, our next is appointed officials, which would be the deputy mayor and
Director of
director of
Administrative Services. You had indicated we have not included engineer. The decision was not to include the city engineer, but we have included here the Director of Administrative Services and the Deputy Mayor position.
And what was our rationale for not including the engineer?
You decided that an engineer can be hired and that under third-class city code, the assumption is the city would not have the expertise to do adequate public works and that an engineer would have to be on staff to perform that. So that, am I paraphrasing? Nowadays, you can just go out and hire an engineer. You don't have to have one on staff. And the city has several engineers on staff, but none are the appointed official engineer.
Right. So it wouldn't be an appointed
Yeah,
engineer.
you have
I
engineer.
remember-
You can go out and hire an engineering firm for public
I
works
remember
projects.
that, yes. I remember that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was like in May.
Yeah.
Right.
Months and months and
Right.
months away, it seems like.
And the Director of Administrative Services, the Department of Administrative Services
And
already exists in the city right now, but building that into the charter.
This
I can't hear you.
formalizes the department.
We're not hearing them this.
We're not.
Oh,
Oh,
we gotta talk louder.
Yeah.
The Department of Administrative Services and the Director of Administrative Services already exist. We're building those into the charter. The Deputy Mayor position does not formally exist, but we're providing for that
Right.
position as part of the charter.
That was when we discussed how many days the deputy mayor
120.
could, it was 60, with an extension of 60, no
120.
more than 120. So those are all now codified. That was those questions we asked.
Right,
So we're simply putting them into article form.
right,
So
right.
if there's no questions on those, we can go forward, because they were essentially the decisions you already made.
Yeah.
We just want you to have.
So we all agreed on the 120 days plus the 45 days before we replace.
Yeah,
So
the
that would be
120 is the
almost-
maximum.
We could be with a deputy mayor for 6
About half,
months,
right?
Yeah, with
for
60 and
at
60
least a half year.
Yeah, 60
Yeah.
and 60 was 120 days. After that, it's a forfeit of the office.
But that's a long time, but if we agree, I'm not gonna make meetings about it.
Yeah, what we want to really present tonight are those articles that have not been reviewed with you before, but many of them are relatively technical in nature, but we wanted to go over them with the commission as we're putting all of the pieces together to complete the charter.
Okay, want to go to ordinances?
Yeah, going to that.
Next is ordinances, Article 7,
Did we do appointments?
ordinances and resolutions of council.
So we just skipped over appointment of officials, because I did it.
We just
But
did.
Oh, I-
he just included it all in, there was no discussion for each.
There's only two appointed officials?
Right.
Yeah.
And I had a question about the majority of vote for city council members present at a public meeting. And I thought that should be at least a majority of city councils, not necessarily present at the meeting. If
Okay.
we're going to appoint officials over the city, the majority of the council's members should agree who that person should be, not just the majority present at the meeting. There might only be 4 council members present, and if 2 of them vote, I think it should be the majority of the councils that
That's a legitimate
sit.
decision.
Where are you?
6-1, appointment of officials.
What?
It's
Article
601.
6.
Okay.
A.
6-1A, yeah.
Well, that's a department director, so, yeah, those are appointed officials, but those are the directors of departments.
Right.
601.
Point about the city council members being present.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. To do so runs the risk of having a minority of city council walk out, which could keep, could shut the city completely down.
For appointing a department head?
Because they don't like the department head. They don't like the person.
So if the city said,
The same argument would be, if all you're doing is appointing department head, why do we need this extra group in there? See, it's the same thing. I'm saying, I don't think it's necessary, because it could shut down that whole department, because somebody just doesn't like that person. And you're saying, well, we need extra, but why would anybody do that for a department head? That's the exact same thing.
I think it's
What
different.
did you suggest?
I just suggested that more of council member, instead of just saying who's ever present votes on the department head or appointing, that we need a majority of the council members to have that say. We are now putting a person that's making a $6 figure, which we didn't want to require them to live in the city. Everybody here is concerned about finance and taxes. This person ain't even paying taxes. So, to say, okay, council members, if there's only 3 of you there, you decide you go ahead and approve the department head.
But there couldn't be just 3, that's not a quorum.
They couldn't have, that wouldn't be a quorum.
What's the quorum?
Well, it says present at a public meeting. It doesn't say a quorum of the
Well, you
members.
can only take action to put a quorum.
Right,
So
okay.
4 would be the minimum.
So in theory,
Just
let's just
majority.
assume it's under the current system right now.
Yeah.
If 5 members of council showed up and 3 of them voted to put that person in a position, still a minority of council has approved someone for a position. And I think that's the heart of what Darlene's saying here, is it should always be a majority of members of council.
The quorum.
I would argue that I'm going the other way and say, I think things like this should give broad latitude to the mayor and say, effectively, council has the opportunity to object and should accept the mayor's decision. And I would change the wording completely and just say with consent of council.
No.
No.
And we, but
We
the,
could have a divided government sometime.
Yeah, so that's not,
well, that's why and so the council does not consent. I mean, the council can say no. I'm not saying, I'm saying the mayor is the one doing the hiring. That person presents that person, the selection, the nominee to council, and council can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Consent of council implies a majority vote of council. So if it's a split government and council says, no, we don't want this person, that person doesn't get hired. But I worry that we start micromanaging a city council 50 years from now by saying, well, it's going to be 1 person more, 1 person less. And all we're really saying is, we want council to approve this person. If the council doesn't approve, then find another person. And instead, we're saying, well, should it be 6? Should it be 5? Just give the council the opportunity to approve them. and just say the council decides. We shouldn't be micromanaging a city council made up of people who haven't been born yet.
I think, so number one, Chairperson, I think that a majority of the council members that are present, I think it should be the majority of council members, period. Not those that are present. That's one thing I want to say. And the other thing, as we continue to talk about 50 years from now, this would effectively go into effect January.
Yeah.
Right? So we're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now.
Oh, absolutely.
And then it could be that there's another commission or this home rule charter continues if it was voted in. So then we're only talking about maybe 10 years. So we're not talking, it's not like this can't be changed at a particular time. And we're not talking 50 years. Over 50 years, it could change however the community is changing, I think. But I still like the fact that, I still like the idea that the majority of the city council members, I see that, but then it goes on to say present at the meeting. So.
That's what.
You can't just say a quorum. Wouldn't that be majority, or that's not clear to me that? Because when you say majority, wouldn't that be a quorum?
I mean, essentially,
Now,
yeah.
legally, you have two different questions. So council can theoretically take action at a properly held public meeting at which a quorum is present. A quorum, under your current process of 7 council members, means 4 people are available and participating in the meeting. You're going to define how many do or have to be present physically, but the quorum would then be 4. An action of council established at a meeting would then be 3 would be approving any action. 2 is a tie if there's a quorum and only 4 are present. A majority of council will be interpreted by courts to mean if you have 7 council seats filled, then 4 need to vote in the affirmative. So there is a difference in terms of we have a public meeting, it's a regularly scheduled council meeting, 5 council members show up. You have a proper meeting, the presentment of whatever it is that you're bringing to them. In this case, you're talking about the appointment of an official. If 3 vote for it, that appointment is approved. If you put in the charter that it has to be a majority of council, regardless of the number of members that are at the meeting, there has to be 4 that approve. So you would have to have at least 4 at the meeting approving it, 5 at the meeting, 6 at the meeting, 7 at the meeting. Still has to be 4, 5, 6, or 7, but you now have a mandatory vote of 4 people. That's the difference.
It's either 4 or 3.
That's what I said.
That makes sense. And so the way that it's worded now, for you, Darlene, do you not like the majority then? Because does make sense.
The way it's worded now would take 3.
Could take.
And I'm saying,
It would take
like 7 at the
It would,
table.
at least 3.
Yeah.
At
Has the
least,
potential, under
It's
circumstances,
3, and I'm saying
depending on
it should be
the
3.
people that are there, it could pass with 3.
Right, because 4 is the minimum to hold the meeting.
Correct.
So that's a 3.
Frequently, are council not, are there only 4 of them there? I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter.
I don't know that I've ever seen it in real life.
Yeah.
But I do understand where Darlene's coming from, but I also understand where Brian's coming from, because we exist under a strong mayor government now, and I will concede that by changing the language, we are essentially reducing the powers of a strong mayor. So I could be satisfied either way, because I do understand both points.
It's a good point.
Yeah, and I do too. I really do. I see where you're coming from, Darlene, and I understand why you would want that, and like that does sound good. It just may be, I think, challenging because you don't really know how many people are going to show up, and so I'm not sure, but I could go either way as well.
Do we have a consensus? Present at the meeting or just a majority?
Like I said, I'd go back to my phrase, the same, exact same thing, saying the majority present would be consent of council, and leave it at that, but that's me. I like the consistency of it's just a statement of approval.
Let's do a quick show of hands then. As it's written now, present at a public meeting. those that support that language? 2, 3, 4.
You got a consensus.
I'm sorry, Brian, did you?
Well, like I said,
President,
I'm fine with that. I just like the terminology, I
Okay, we
think.
can work on the terminology.
Yeah,
The
but
idea is,
that's fine, yes.
You got a consensus.
So that's fine.
so it's
Okay.
present at the meeting.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And the other question I would raise about that is I thought we talked about department heads living in the city. I know we see it under the administrative services, but that they would live in the city and as council approved that they wouldn't. And we had that long discussion about whether department heads should live in the city. And I
There.
think it's in the administrative service, but it's not under the department heads.
602A.
Right, and that's under the administrative services. So the, under 602A applies to 601 as well? No, that's what I'm saying.
We had it in the other article.
We have it under the administrative services, 602, but we don't have it under 601.
Questions answered.
But we did have that discussion, and it was decided that they should live in the city. The council could approve them to live out of the city.
No, I don't think that question was asked.
The
Yeah.
charter doesn't address
We had a
other
long discussion
departments.
about
We
it.
did have
We had a
conversation
long
about that.
discussion about it.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Well, I have residency requirement, add council waiver language for department heads.
Where's that at?
On my notes from the discussion,
Oh, okay, oh, I thought,
So-
okay,
that was a decision made.
Yeah.
So we'll add
thank you.
the language below 602, duplicated in 601. Is there a legal objection to that? You can require employees residency?
Yep.
Whether it's good policy is, time is going to tell.
Right,
Because,
Yep.
Well, and that's why we
I think
decided
that's-
that council could waive it.
yeah,
that's,
But
that's.
it just puts the impetus, it changes,
and council will waive it by the
Yeah.
majority president.
Right,
it forces a mayor to say, there's a reason why this person lives in Manheim Township.
Sure.
Who lives in Manheim Township should be in the council, says, yeah, that's reasonable.
Right.
Move on, yeah. That's all. Adds one little line.
and then the other
nomination.
question I had about 602 is I was wondering, we talked a lot about the controller working with the administrative services. Does that need to be under there? Because our controller position
The
changed.
controller has review under their own section.
Right, so it doesn't need to be under administrative service, I'm just asking, okay.
Yeah, try to keep all the different roles separate.
Why we identify who the administrative services will work with, and it doesn't say nothing about controller, that's why I
There's a
asked.
separate article.
They don't work for the controller.
No, work with,
With, and
This
that's,
doesn't identify who they work with. This Department of Administrative Services is really, this is identifying actually who they work for under the direction and supervision of the mayor. They assist the mayor in preparation. All of the other duties of the controller, which include giving counsel to the director of
That's under the
administrative
controller.
services,
that's under
is set
the,
forth in the
okay,
controller.
just wanted to make sure.
the controller position has the power to review and also
I
review the
understand
budget,
that.
review the fiscal, I'm forgetting the words, but it's
Yeah, financials,
review,
yep,
because everybody has their own job to do. But the controller has some audit powers and pre-audit powers. Okay,
Not
so
in Article 10
that's
either.
appointed officials. Now we go to, okay, appointed officials. Now we'll move to ordinances and resolutions. This is probably the most technical article of the bunch. It was legal review provided on this. This was, I think you have a full legal review, Barry. I think this was all, we did this,
and the only issue I had was 704 where the 3 days, I don't remember talking about a minimum of 3 days must be intervened between the first reading and affirmative vote and the second reading and an affirmative vote.
I think
thought-
that was edited because we had the same question. I think it's now 7 in this.
Right,
The current-
so this
because
is
I think-
changed.
Yeah, 3 is a requirement for zoning?
Local government.
Unit Debt Act, for borrowing money. 3 is the number, but not for other ordinances. So we edited that with legal review so that 7 is required, but if the law allows for a shorter period in the event of a borrowing, you can do the shorter period. You know, if the city has the authority to do 3 days, they could take the 3 days. They could still hold the 7 days. Follow me? It won't prohibit them from using 3 days to borrow
How
money.
would you rewrite that?
Yeah, because it says.
We did rewrite it.
I know,
It
but
says
we
there's
can't
a
see
minimum
it.
of 3
Oh,
days
yeah?
must
Okay, it's right
intervene.
there. E, see it, a minimum, what was changed?
Well, the one we just got printed still says 3 days, so we.
Yeah, that
didn't-
was
Okay,
a later
so you
edit.
changed that to
Yeah.
7.
Oh, okay.
So that now says 7, okay?
It's a minimum of
Definitely
7.
more time.
Yeah, it's now a minute, that's not what we edited. So it's a minimum of 7.
Darlene, explain to me what, like, is that,
Well, it just said 3 days, and I was like, that wasn't our discussion.
7.
It was 7, so I'm just reading what they
Okay,
gave us, and I'm like,
Right.
no,
7 is good, right?
7 is okay.
Okay.
I just
all
didn't
right,
want
that's
going
what I
for
was
3
trying to
days for an
understand.
ordinance.
7 is good.
Right.
So we're good. So we're good? All right. Okay, that's it? That's 2-page explaining ordinance power?
Wait.
Go ahead.
So,
The other highlights.
Oh,
so I'm
yeah,
waiting
yeah.
for you to go on. His other-
So, 701 under ordinance adoption of the code of ethics for elected and appointed officials of the city. Since the ethic committee is actually coming up with some language for this, where would that fit in?
I think it fits into what we've discussed in the ethics committee, because we've established like a base set of rules, but at the end of the day, we really need someone to expand on those rules for a more comprehensive ethics code. And I actually want to make a note, if we could capitalize code of ethics the same way we capitalize administrative code, I'd
Sure.
appreciate that.
Right. And will this say some type of language that refers to the ethic code with the standards that we came up with in that committee?
I think that would be like just an
Like
understood requirement.
article, I mean, it should point to what we came up with in the ethics code.
This is requiring the ethics code be adopted as an ordinance.
Right.
That's what this is requiring. It's a power, right?
Well, the only way the ethics code, there's going to be a separate section of your charter
Correct.
that details what the ethics code must maintain, must contain. This provision of the charter is saying that any ethics code
Understand.
must be adopted in a particular manner, and that manner is by ordinance.
Right. And I'm just saying, can there be a reference to that point? A lot of the charters, when they're talking about something somewhere else within the charter, refer to article whatever,
okay.
so that you know where to find it and what that is in reference to.
I would be okay with that, having like, I forget, is it
We
Article
talked-
11?
As identified
11,
in
so like just saying as
Article 12,
identified as in Article 11, like if we're just adding more specific text, I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
12.
yep.
And and number 7, we say establishment or abolishment of city authority, board and commission. That also we're gonna talk about a little bit later.
Where are
And
you,
so,
Darlene?
still under ordinance 701,
717.
it's number
Yeah.
7.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we gotta dig in.
So we haven't even discussed that yet, but so that would also be a reference point to when we discuss boards, authorities, and commissions, which is further down the agenda.
Yeah, a cross-reference for that would not be appropriate. The reason being is that your provision under boards, commissions, and authorities is going to be dealing with the types of memberships, how they're selected, but each board, commission, and authority is going to be elected and or approved under a different type of law. For example, the Municipalities Authorities Law, the Airport Authority Act, the Downtown Investment District Act, et cetera. So I would, while I understand your desire for cross-referencing, this is again really just setting forth that the only way that the legislative action that any of those acts would require is done by ordinance. The section on boards, commissions, and authorities is going to deal with separate issues that are not necessarily related to how you actually legislate. So they're not going to be going into the detail of each specific board, commission, authority. This is really just a clarification to council and to the administration that the only way you can end up with getting an authority or getting rid of an authority is through an ordinance.
Count, okay. And then, number 5, otherwise regulate the conduct of a person within the city. I'm not even sure what that means.
715. that what you're talking about?
7195.
Yeah.
It reads, otherwise regulate the conduct of persons within the city. What does that mean? What are we talking about?
Yeah, jaywalking,
It's a general
littering.
broad ordinance that talks about
Very
conduct.
broad.
So that could be criminal behavior, that could be behavior of individuals, and that's language that actually mimics what's in most of the municipal codes,
Yeah.
including the third-class city code and others. So it's the power to pass law that affects people.
I can understand a little worry with that,
Yeah.
but
The way it's worded.
I will say without that, we could face some legislative hurdles.
That
Because
the
like,
police wouldn't,
like there are certain things like littering, for example, that like I think we all agree littering's bad. Based off what I'm reading, the city wouldn't have the ability to make littering a offense.
why?
Well, because we wouldn't have the power to regulate the conduct of persons within the city.
It's really the discussion between the
I think under the police, we could still say littering is offense. I'm trying to say the conduct of a person within the
Yeah.
city. I don't know, the language don't sit well with me.
Okay.
I just,
Is it standard third-class city code language or
I'll leave
Plan
it-
A
yes.
language?
Yeah, and
Already something we're already,
I didn't see it
is it
in,
our,
I might have missed
under
it.
our law already?
this is the language in the charter. Let me step back a step. The ordinance article is outlining those things that will be legislative acts that will be done by ordinance. Because ordinance controls things in the city and citizens. Ordinances require public review, multiple readings. They cannot be changed by a resolution. So the other way a council can act is by resolution. And resolutions are statement of policy, statement of acknowledgement, and resolutions cannot change ordinances. So when you are impacting activity and conduct of persons and regulations that affect people with penalties or with authorities, you want it to be the most open process, and that's ordinances. Because remember, these are all subject, some of these are all subject to also reconsideration.
And to tackle it, that's exactly why.
These are a higher bar because they're higher actions and higher powers of the city, so you want to control higher powers with the avenue where more citizens involvement, and that's the ordinance process.
I think the counterpoint to this is the referendum section.
So, I just asked for explanation.
Yeah, okay. That makes-
Article 7, I have, the council may, and I think I'm looking at F, 704F maybe. Council may by affirmative vote of a majority plus one of the members present a public meeting, reduce, eliminate the period between introduction and passage of ordinance. And I think that relates to that 7-day that we just talked about. So we're saying they have 7 days to do it, and now we're giving them permission to also limit.
We amended that because we thought.
Oh, okay,
So
I'm
we'll
sorry,
show it.
I
We
didn't
thought
get
that
the
was our-
amendment.
You're catching all the things
Okay.
on our second reading.
Oh, okay, I didn't
Kudos
get
to
that
you.
yet. I'll get that next time.
No,
Okay.
kudos to you, because we have, it's up here. Fred will show it there.
So these edits were made in the last couple days, right?
Well, we were doing legal review.
Yeah.
and-
Right, okay.
Okay, so we just didn't get that copy yet.
So on
Okay.
one
Good with
review,
it.
I
We'll
asked
waste
them
time.
to limit this to only when it's necessary or intended to address the exigent circumstances or emergency.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that
Right,
makes
this is
sense
what
to
we
me.
discussed, yeah.
think of COVID.
Right,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
We had to go through a month to get an ordinance to help people stay safe. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
So,
Got it.
Okay,
Yep.
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Missing from
So
here.
we're trying to narrow this thing down so that,
I understand,
You
I'm
just got
just,
way ahead of us there.
Yeah.
No,
I'm just reading what they gave me and it's
Yeah.
questions,
Yeah, kudos.
okay.
These were
All right.
distributed Monday, and we've been working
Yeah.
since
Since
then.
Monday,
Yeah.
okay.
Barry and Jerry and I.
Got it. Are there any other changes that we?
That we should know about?
I don't think it was that in the day.
Send it on.
Can we know?
Let's see.
We were doing that for a while.
We do have a question here.
Oh, we have to make a decision.
That was the
708, right,
708.
708 was a question for the
Right.
group, but it wasn't, we have expiration of 20 days. That was, yeah, that's 708A.
Article 3,
We have
Section
20 days.
39.
Right,
In
That, we
section
tied that in with
Right, and
the
it
reconsideration,
eight, It
Correct.
references.
okay?
yeah.
right.
Section,
20.
which is
So you have 20 days, but then they could be suspended, and you have 20 days essentially to for people to come in and say, we're going to
So,
reconsider this.
the-
Can you explain
the-
this to
Yeah.
us?
The current law is not the third-class city code. This is actually under the optional charter law. Ordinances take effect 20 days after their adoption. Third-class city code was actually 10.
Right.
And the optional charter law, because the optional charter law was creating a broader power for the mayor and administration,
Right.
was basically designed to give time for more citizens to appeal the decision
Okay.
or through court proceedings and/or to take, as you're doing here in your charter, the opportunity to petition to have it reconsidered. So rather than changing 10 or going back to third-class city code of 10, what's in
20.
here is the same thing that we currently operate under now, which is 20 days.
Okay.
Okay.
And that dovetails with the reconsideration
Right.
side.
We made the reference to the reconsideration section.
Okay.
Right. And you got the reference in
See
there,
that?
like that. Okay.
There you go.
All right.
We've been working together a
The
long
little
time.
thing.
Yeah. Okay.
All right?
Okay.
That's it for ordinances and resolutions. We'll clean this up and you'll have, it is our intent as a side note to get you a complete charter by Monday or so,
Okay.
this weekend, Monday. In other words, one document, so you'll be able to read it in its entirety, absent sections that aren't done yet, of
Gary,
course.
just one note on that, when that comes, that will not have gone through
Legal review.
a legal review, so we'll continue to work through that. Many of the things that you've already pointed out about consistency of language and saying the same things the same way each time, hopefully we'll catch that over the next review or two. We've been kind of flying pretty quickly with all these sections.
Yes, we
Uh,
are.
And I'm behind them and not necessarily in front of you. So I just want you to be aware that there may be still some comments coming on those.
Okay, that's
And
fine.
we're giving deference to the solicitor on his legal expertise. So we're making these changes, so we show to you, this is what your solicitor recommended. Because
Got it.
Okay,
Authorities?
moving to authorities,
Authorities,
boards, and
boards.
commissions. And basically, this article is giving the authority to create authorities, boards, and commissions from time to time as necessary in order to provide for the delivery of city services.
And it provides for the requirement of membership.
Right, they're created by ordinance
Hold on for a
or,
second. Hold on for a second.
What's the matter?
I got it.
She's got
Just
it.
needed a moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Gary, did you guys amend this subsequent to some meetings today? I don't know whether you did or didn't. I was just saying, if you did, I don't know. If you did.
No, I don't think so. There's no amendment to this. No, we didn't have any objection. No.
I was trying to get ahead of whether changes had been made. I'll tell you in advance.
Okay.
You didn't review it?
This is
No.
our first time discussing this, correct?
Yeah, this still
Well, I
subject
think we
to,
talked about it, but we
solicitor.
haven't seen it in this form.
under membership, we're stating that there should be broad membership representative of the various different segments of the city, geographic and representation, ethnicity, economic, racial, and other characteristics as appropriate.
we might have that changed. Barry's right. I think there was a, go up further. Is the word broadest still there?
I don't,
Okay, broad was too vague. So broadest was too vague. Remember, Barry? Yeah, it was too vague legally. So
I'm sorry, what?
I want to make sure we have the same version, the final version you're going to see. The one trigger word was, okay, this is the most recent one. There was a word that was too vague legally. We had to make it
Okay, more
more
specific.
precise.
It was, the word you were looking at was in 702A.
Yeah, broadest. Under the membership requirements, so you'll see that.
902A.
902A, yeah. The version I have is 7, so you can see we're all,
And this version is 8.
right, it's.
Well, that's because we renumbered.
Yeah.
Okay, but remember, this is
So
flowing.
everybody's clear.
Yeah, we
This
get
is
it.
flowing, so my apologies on that.
Yeah,
That's not supposed to be.
We finally settled on a numbering list.
okay. So, remind me, what is it, the membership that we discussed?
We did discuss this before.
I'm sorry, Amy.
What's the members, did we discuss this before?
We did not discuss,
Oh,
we're just
okay.
presenting this to you.
Okay.
Yeah, we did not discuss this before.
Yeah, many of
Yeah,
these,
so, it might be helpful to just walk us through it if you could, please.
well, the establishment part explains how you can, what you can do and establish authorities, which Barry explained several laws governing authorities and the different kind of authorities available. Boards and commissions are those established by the charter or the administrative code.
And sometimes by law.
And or applicable law. Council could establish a commission, the administrative code could establish a commission, applicable law could require a commission. So this gives the city the authority to create commissions under all those scenarios.
When something is added to the administrative code, what is the process? Is that?
It's an ordinance. It's an ordinance,
So
correct.
there's public
It's an
review?
ordinance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
We're
okay.
changing the ordinance
That's
for
great,
the extent.
all right.
And that's under C, right? That's where that goes into talking about. Council can change or may abolish by ordinance.
Right, and the authority, that's under the law. You need an ordinance to get rid of an authority.
And D is requiring provision of providing annual reports, including financial reports to council on any authorities.
Right, all authorities have provide independent financial
Right.
reports. That's an annual, you're requiring the authorities to report back to the council on their fiscal condition. And that's a requirement. So you can tell your authorities you must do it.
And the authority itself is required to have an independent audit done annually.
Right. Okay.
What about boards and commissions? Do they have to report?
Well, they would have spending power under the Director of Administrative Services and Council's budget.
And do they have to report on the work that they're doing, even if they don't have money?
So that, again, your boards and commissions are created by ordinance.
Okay,
So the ordinance would set forth what the
The
requirements
requirements
of the
are?
board and commission should be vis-a-vis council.
okay,
So
all right.
council's establishing it. If they want reporting, it should be in the ordinance they adopt. If they're not getting it and they'd like it, then they can amend the ordinance to require it.
Okay,
Okay. The membership is who should be appointed and the rules and requirements, for appointment. Again, the mayor is appointing members of these authorities, boards, and commissions, subject to approval by council majority vote of members present at the public meeting, same language we discussed before. There is a more of a filter here, direction to the mayor that the administrative code itself will provide procedures for the public notice of what appointments are available and the vacancies to encourage broad citizen participation. And then there's language that mirrors the ethics where it says, procedures shall include as a goal the representation of citizens, including but not limited to geographic city residency, gender, economic, racial, ethnic, and other characteristics. So you're requiring a broad notice by the city of the availability of seats on authorities, boards, and commissions, so people could apply
right.
for those. So there's less, it's less opaque, it's more transparent.
So, I need to listen to something.
And we're providing for a qualification standard that they need to be residents of the city. Unless
Except by
there's
applicable law. Some
Right.
laws allow non-residents as long as they have a controlling interest or an interest, an overriding interest in a business in the city.
I mean, we can't put, I don't think this can be put, this could not be, from my perspective, this can't be put into the charter because it would, I don't know, it could create some challenges down the line. But, that being said, assuming charter gets passed, I would lobby council and mayor when they're writing the administrative code about this to somehow figure out how to increase the civic engagement programs that the neighborhood group has, because I think that what's really important is there's an education of the community about local government, how it works, how you access it, how you participate to get things done that you want to see done, and I think that takes education. which for me means right now the neighborhood program department and the civic leadership programs they have would be expanded. But I don't think we can put that in the charter. Just saying, I think it needs to be, I don't know why I don't think it should, I don't know why, Darlene. I'm not sure I'm not sure what the language would be, so I think that's what.
Well, I got some language that we could probably use. I think council shall appoint citizens, taxpayers, and business owners to authorities and citizens to boards and commission or other agencies of the city, making the greatest possible use of the talents and interests of such citizens, taxpayers, and business owner, thereby promoting the public interest and welfare of the city. And I think that opens up to let us, at least put something into the charter that's going to require that there's more citizen participation. As I went over the list, and maybe Barry can tell us, but there's 37 boards and commissions, 31.
It's about 30 to, I think there's now down to 30 or 31.
30 or 31. Why, the public might want to know why this is important, because each of these boards or commissions have budgets. And if we're talking about finances, I would wonder and how many of them we could incorporate together, and I think that would have to happen.
I would just note that most of them actually do not have budgets.
Okay, so they don't.
Many of these are commissions that serve in advisory capacity to whether it's council or other operations within the city, and they don't have budgets.
One of the things, after looking over the board, some language I would like to have is that the term limit that some of the board members can serve. We have people that have been on boards for a long time. With a lot of people within the city, that should rotate. I would like to see them, some people have, some of the commissions and boards and authorities have 5-year terms. And people have been on there for six terms. So like 30 years they've been sitting on.
And so that's where I go towards the education, because you can't just say, you can't just put term limits and then not have education to help increase participation on boards and commissions, because it's voluntary and it's time consuming. And, I was asked to be on a board, and I think really carefully about whether I was going to do it. And after a while, it became way too much work. And I think for a lot of people, that is a reality, which is why I feel like an education component, which is going to cost money, is super important to have. And that's why I'm just not sure how you incorporate something like that into the charter.
Given that, I understand your concern around term limits.
Yeah.
But, that could exacerbate the problem if we establish term limits. Lots of these boards and commissions already have challenges finding people to sit on.
That's what I was getting at
No,
with
I know,
the education.
I know.
Civic engagement,
Yeah, I know you're saying the civic education piece. Frankly, the civic education piece could also have the consequence, like it educated you, to realize it's too much. And we'd have even more problems getting people to sit on the boards and commissions. So around that idea of term limits, Darlene, I understand your intent behind that, but I think we need to go cautiously around that we don't create unintended consequences of a lot of vacancies on the boards and not have people ready to apply to them. That would be my only
I would just
concern.
note for the commission's reference, a reminder that each of these boards, commissions, and authorities is created and/or amended and modified by ordinance. So again, if ultimately there's a will of the citizens to limit term limits on any particular board or authority, council can do that anytime they want. They can amend their ordinances, or when they're creating it, they can. I just throw that up, so whether you want to make it in the charter or leave it to council, that's really the decision you're making.
Right, yeah, and I guess I would add, I think, right, there are certainly boards, commissions, and authorities where experience and relevant experience and tenure adds value. I'm thinking like the zoning hearing board or the planning commission. If you have a knowledgeable, experienced person who's adding value and they have to leave because their term ran out, and we can't be sure that we'll replace them with somebody who has comparable experience. And I think that can be defined within each ordinance. Like I'm thinking about, I've served on the Public Art Board, and, we struggle to keep people as it is. And, it's even when we advertise for openings, and I'd like to, I would hate to have somebody have to leave because of our charter, but I think we can put that into the ordinances that go with each one.
Yes, I was gonna say, I don't wanna have to yell. Thank you. I do agree with you. I think we do need the term limits. I think I would like to see, like the way you worded it with broad people in the community, business owners and others, we have a diverse community and we should see others serving on these boards. So, but I do think what you're saying, Amy, is important because we need to educate people on, what they're getting into, and we need to advertise. Many times, a lot of the citizens that I talk to have no idea what's really going on. So it's going to take effort, but if we do put the term limits in, we need to put these measures in as well. Again, I'm not sure how you would word it, but I agree with you, we would need something like that.
May I add, we have 60,000, close to 60,000 residents. If we had civic engagement, if we had education of the community in some way, I don't think we would have such trouble in having people to serve on boards and commissions.
Let's start with, I appreciate what you're saying, having 60,000 residents. How many people voted of those 60,000 in the last mayoral election?
We said 6,000. That's how many voted.
You're wrong.
That's how many
6,000,
voted.
yeah.
But what does that have to do with the people?
So you're talking about civic engagement, so we only had 10% of the population could take their time to go to a mayoral election and vote.
Yeah.
And that's 10% of the population. And I hear what you're saying.
That doesn't mean the other 90% are not available.
No.
But they need to be.
Well, they need to be.
Yeah, they're not.
It's great.
No, I'm saying
I just
they need to be
I just
engaged.
don't want to
They
be
need to
too
be educated.
Pollyannish about it sounds great. There's 60,000 people that we could do that should.
Yeah.
And they should be engaged, but the reality is I don't know that they are. And I think I just don't want to back us into a corner with the assumption of, out of these 60,000 people, there should be something, like you said, the Public Art Board, which is considering not so controversial until you put something on the front of the library. That should be.
Or the parking garage. Parking garage.
But I'm just concerned, I'm hearing all that. And
I'm just
I
making
agree.
a point.
Yeah, no.
I'm just making a point.
Yeah, I agree.
And
It's like, if we can't get the level of engagement to go to the polls for a 15-minute piece, to think about getting them to serve on a board or a commission that's going to be 3 hours once a month. I'm just worried about that.
Right, and just to back up what Maxine is saying, that might encourage more people to get involved if government is open to them. If you feel like you don't have no say, you're not going to the poll to vote. So one of the things that we must do is create that avenue, and by saying, not you sitting on 5 boards, because you're representing us on 5 different boards, there should be some limit on that. I think some of the boards, authorities, and commissions, maybe you can sit on 2, but there's no reason why we got one person sitting on 5 boards, and, or authorities, the same person. I'm not saying we do. I'm just, we're being.
Something that happens?
I don't think, Darlene, I don't think these referring to anyone in particular,
I'm not-
hypothetical
I'm just
where we
saying.
are essentially packing boards with specific people.
Right, and what I'm saying is that I believe that and I got some language for us. All citizens appointed by council to boards, commissions, or other agencies of the city must be city residents of the city prior to the time of appointment. We know the airport authority boards that include other municipalities have representation, and must remain residents during the term of appointment. Council shall publish and post notice of vacancies and shall keep a master list of persons interested in such appointments. So I think that, that will help create people, because you'll have a list of people. So as people are rotating off the board, we can then have a list of people to ask and recommend. But I mean, we do this all the time, and this has been happening for a long time. So as soon as I knew we was doing this home rule, commission, authorities, and boards, I really had that interest in there, because I looked over the list, and I think there's a lot of on the list where we say some are mayor appointments. I really believe some of that needs to be council appointments, and it's just about the power thing, whether whoever the mayor may be, having the power over all the boards, authorities, and commission is too much. Some of that responsibility should be put on the council that we elect as people to represent us, so that we get that representation across boards, authorities, and commissions. Go ahead.
I believe that the city is currently doing civic engagement education. They are doing that. It's not huge, because it costs money, and it takes staff and time. And I'm hesitant to limit somebody who's interested in participating. And I'm hesitant to, I think if we're going to have to be a resident, you have to say property. Because somebody who has property or owns a business.
We said business owner, resident, or taxpayer is in the language.
Right. And I liked the first summary language that you read off. That I would be fine incorporating something like that. But I don't want to put term limits on it. And I think it's fine that the mayor they're essentially nominating somebody, because the council has to approve. And I guess if we were going to add anything, maybe council needs to make recommendations to the mayor for consideration.
And a lot of the boards and authorities are mayor and council approved. Like the mayor might get to appoint one person, and then the other one's got to be approved by council. Some of the boards say you must be an engineer or an architect. Some of them have requirements. But I do think that we need to look over, and I think for Peter, for your explanation about not being able to fill, then we need to look as a city, is it necessary? If you can't find people to sit on the public arts board, is it necessary to have that? Maybe that decision about what needs to happen, we need to think outside of the box and come up with another way to engage residents to decide what should happen about public art. Instead of having this commission and we can't find nobody to sit on it, so we keep recycling the same people over and over, maybe the answer isn't having the commission, it's getting rid of it and figuring out and think outside of the box. How do we get public input on what should go on the garage? How do we get public input about what needs to happen at the library, instead of the same 5 people that have been sitting on the board for 30 years? And that's just an example. I'm not saying.
The public art board, that is not what.
I just picked on John because John's here. That was just an example because he was here. I'm not pointing to any board in particular. I'm just saying as an example.
I think, this needs to
not
be broad.
Can I add a couple?
Well, actually, could we hear from the mayor, please? Your Honor, please.
Commissioner Byrd, it's like you're in my head from when I first started as mayor, because I really wanted to see a refresh, and there were a lot of vacancies when I came into office. And that is part of the Neighborhood Leadership Academy and our efforts to use the Neighborhood Leadership Academy, and even the J.P. McCaskey and that cohort of having younger voices and a lot of diversity. And we've used that as a pipeline in identifying people who would like to serve on boards, commissions, and authorities. I want to just paint a picture for you about the boards, commission, and authorities, because I completely agree. We are actually trying to go through a process of consolidation, and it is really discouraging how few of them we can eliminate because they're required.
Right.
And also, there are some that literally don't meet.
Right.
Because there isn't business for them to meet. And so you will see the same people on the higher ed authority or the what's the other, municipal authority. They don't regularly meet, and it's kind of been the same people. Many of the boards, commissions, and authorities have very specific guidance about who can be on them, and that's from the ordinances. And so as you go through them, there's a mix of you have to be an engineer, you have to be a plumber, you have to be a certified XYZ. There's only one that is appointed completely and solely at the mayor's discretion, and that is the Lancaster Parking Authority. Every other one is because it is approved through council. And so that is through a nominating committee, which has 3 members. It is currently chaired by Councilor Kaliks. Council at any time can make recommendations for members of any board, commission, authority. The public can make that. We have put out social media requests. We have done interviews for candidates for planning commission. I think you've been part of that, Commissioner Dastra. So this is just to say it's a broad array of commissions, boards, and authorities, and there are people that have been on for a long time, and then there have been others that are quite fleeting and that we have a hard time filling because they don't meet very often, but they're required by law. So I just wanted to add that into the mix.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I just want, because I haven't said anything, I just want to say I also don't agree with the idea of term limits. I think there is some value to having that long-term institutional knowledge, especially when I think about planning commission or traffic commission. I mean, Dean Evans just retired from traffic commission. I think he was on for like decades.
32 years.
32 years. So like, I think there is a value in that and seeing some of the change undergone with the work you're doing. But I do feel you on the point, because like the way I see some of this is like, we're advocating for more citizen powers, but I think we also need to be advocating to the citizens, like you have a duty and responsibility to your government as well. And when these boards go vacant, you're not doing that level of public service. And it can't just all fall on the mayor and the administration to fill these things.
Right.
Like people got to step up and take charge and have an impact in their community.
Sure.
Yep. And so, and the other thing that I was thinking is the zoning board, and depending on how city council goes as far as districting, how that might change. But by what I read, I'm thinking that can happen at council could change that.
Well, the zoning hearing board is again an ordinance, and that's
Right.
governed by a state act.
Right.
Which is the
You
municipal.
gotta have
planning
it,
code.
understand.
Districting is probably gonna have little to no impact on that. That's gonna be a board that has adjudicatory power,
Right.
just like the planning commission in the city,
Right.
which is unusual, but that's one of the few places that does have that.
Mhm.
Those two bodies are created with requirements from a state act, and council won't be able to deviate from that.
I would make a distinction too between term limits and term.
Right.
Term would be established, and it's in 902B, under the provisions of
902B.
the enabling ordinance, and it would discuss a term. There would always be the opportunity to review at the end of a term whether to reappoint or not an individual. So I think that could very
Cover
well
that.
address the term limit
Okay.
issue without putting a term limit in.
And as a matter of practice,
She would have said that a long time ago.
as a matter of practice, well, if you attend a multitude of our council meetings, you will see that come through the council committee process multiple times. It's reappointments, so that
Right.
your term ends, if it was a 4-year term, you don't automatically get to keep serving. You still have to be reappointed, which means that the mayor would have to recommend you for reappointment, and then council would have to approve you again by a majority vote of the quorum at council. So
Right.
one of the concerns I was having with term limits is you've got different years of terms in multiple boards and commissions. So if you start putting term limits and you have,
Right.
in some boards, it might be a 1-year term and you've put a 2-term limit, then they can only serve for 2 years. Other boards might be 5 years and you've put a 2-term. So again, this is where I think, in all honesty, you're trying to create a broad charter that leaves the power and flexibility. That's where your ordinances come in. The other thing I would note in terms of residency is there are several of our boards which have appointments of city employees to the board.
Right.
Who may not be city residents.
Right.
And if you make a city residency requirement, you may now be creating vacancies that may be very difficult to fill with the expertise that was required by the appointment of that city employee.
Well, my thought on that was that, and I'm looking maybe at the traffic commission, is one that has a lot of city employees and maybe one representative. They could be on the, board, but not have voting rights. So, yes, you need your police officer, yes, you need your public works, but I think that the residents should be the ones that get to vote. And I think that's one of the boards I looked at, that is all city staff. So, you come to, I think they have one, let me just look it up because I don't want to misquote anything here. So the traffic commission has 9 members, 7 of them are city staff, 2 citizens at large. And I think, yes, I believe you do need the police there. Yes, I believe you need to have the fire there. Yes, I believe you need to have somebody from Public Works there. And yes, you need to have the city engineer there to give information, but not to vote on what happens. That should be more of the citizens making those decisions and not staff. And once again, it's this power thing. If they're all appointed by the mayor and issues come up in the neighborhood, and I see where a lot of residents in neighborhood come bring a lot of issues to the traffic commission, and it's just because it's all staff. You got 2 people to vote. So I think we need to give more power to the residents over the boards that have a higher number of staff where it's not a requirement. And yes, I'm not saying those people shouldn't be a part, but they don't have to be voting members, especially if they don't live in the city.
But isn't this what you just put up on the board?
902E is the residency requirement, unless the enabling legislation, the ordinance, provides different rules for that.
So they got to live in the city.
So it's already in there that we have to be residents unless they're waived by the majority vote.
Your language, that's the language was proposed, that's why.
Oh, I'm sorry again.
What happened?
That's right on the back.
You don't have 902E?
Sure.
What I'm saying is the language that was
Oh, no.
suggested did not have that exception. Your language did.
Does, yeah.
Stressing the concern.
Right.
Yeah, we have that, and presumably the ordinance that creates it, as Barry said, would include all those qualifications. And also, if we have 902A, Fred?
We do have 902A.
If you could read 902A on the screen.
Appointments.
Yeah, on appointments, I think we tried to get to the idea that the charter is broad, and the detail about authorities, boards, and commissions, because they're so disparate and there's so many variances, that the administrative code is the place to put these procedures for public lists, for notice, and also to control, give some guidance to the appointing people that what you should be looking for in appointees, okay, outside of term limits. And that's that language there. So the charter is requiring this, and the administrative code is enacting it. And the administrative code, again, is an ordinance. So making the charter really broad, but requiring the administrative code to do it.
Can you repeat that last sentence?
Administrative code is an ordinance.
Or an ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, so the charter is requiring the administrative code to consider everything we talked about, and the administrative code has to have that in it, and how it's fleshed out and all the details will be in the ordinance that adopts the administrative code.
Right, and then the people, right. After
That's the
this
part,
very
yeah.
long circular conversation,
Yes.
I think the way this is written is fine.
Okay, we tried to adjust that, so thank you.
Fine.
Good. Well, we hadn't done this before, so now we've done it.
But I just have one thing to add. I mean, I understand because I've heard you talk about it before, you're concerned that we have too many sometimes. But what I would say is that's also one of the paths for people to access government. If there was not, I'll pick on myself, if there was not a public art board, where would people have gone to tell someone how much they hated that art?
Well, they go there anyway.
But it's still there, and that's what our mayor is here for. Hey, mayor, no, but
But that's if people, sometimes going to city council could be an intimidating thing. These boards, commissions, authorities provide them a line of access to government, without some of which the administration could act without hearing from the community. So I do think they are important.
I do want to give a little bit of rebuttal to your point, because as someone who's learned the rough way how this stuff works, there have been times where I've approached the city council not realizing there were other boards and commissions and authorities before them, and have been literally told at least once, like, well, you weren't at these previous meetings, so more or less we're disregarding your concerns. And so I do think this kind of goes to my point earlier. We do need to give continued education to residents and their civic engagement in these processes, because a lot of residents don't know about these boards, commissions, and authorities. So I'm glad to hear that the city's focusing on consolidation, because I think that level of complexity adds to that confusion.
Definitely.
But they are important, and I'm not disregarding that.
Right. Especially the art.
But I did like that first part, the very first thing you read. I thought that I liked that a lot.
All right, we're going to move to the administrative code chapter. Give me just a moment.
Where are we now? Administrative code.
Article 10, Administrative Code. It's one page.
I'm bringing up.
Should I ask a question?
Darlene's got the whole thing highlighted.
No, not one highlight, but I do have questions.
Let us start. Yeah, let us start so we have context for the question.
And there was a change from the version that you have. If you look at subsection 1001, subsection B, that language was changed from the version that you have. But basically, the chapter or the article is providing for the enactment of an administrative code not later than 18 months after the effective date of the charter that the mayor proposes and provides to city council. The administrative code draft for review and discussion, and it is adopted by ordinance. In the event that it is not, and here's where the change came in the event that council fails to adopt the administrative code within that time period, then the city would fall back under the provisions of the third-class city code and the optional third-class city Plan A provisions, to the extent that they're not inconsistent with the charter, or until such time as an administrative code is enacted.
The prior language let the mayor's administrative code go into effect, and upon reflection, we thought that was too much authority to the mayor. So this gives a fallback. If there's a deadlock on the administrative code, you still have an operating manual to run the city. It's the third-class city code and optional Plan A, but that only extends till there's an administrative code. So you don't always go back to the old way. So the administrative code does govern eventually.
And I think, Ms. Rufo, you had asked earlier, and subarticle C indicates that the code can only be amended by ordinance.
Perfect.
Yep.
1002 then reviews the different elements that need to be included. Basically is a plan for the organization, administrative structure, procedures, and operations of the city. And we've outlined the very specific elements that need to be included. A review or an inclusion of the different departments, offices, authorities, boards, commission, and other units of government, their scope of responsibility and procedures for their operations, budgeting, accounting, and financial procedures, purchasing and acquisition procedures, personnel policies, other policies and practices desirable for the efficient and effective administration of city government. So those are the elements that need to be incorporated within the administrative code.
But others could be included, right?
Yeah.
Not limited to.
Yeah, it's not limited to those.
So my questions that I have is, we talked a lot in the charter about things we like to see in the administrative code. Is there going to be reference to those things so that we know that they're included in the charter? I mean, from the very beginning, a lot of stuff we talked about, you were like, well, you can put that in the administrative code.
Well, we indicated throughout our charter, our articles, that
So it
will be in the administrative code.
Okay.
Will be in the administrative code.
Okay, the other question that I have is, 18 months is a long time. If we want this charter voted in November, and we want it to go in effect, and a lot of the key issues that I were concerned about that needed to be in the charter, that the consensus was put them on the administrative code, we're talking a year and a half before they would even become implemented. So I think a year and a half is a long time. I think if the administrative code's going to run a lot of this charter, it should be developed within a year, that we make sure that things that we're going to do is going to get done. And one of the examples I'll use is at the Ethics Committee, we had Scranton that put in their ethics code, and it just sat there. It said do it, but they didn't act on it. Nothing happened with it. It was just in their charter until something happened. And what was it like? Just recently, even though it's been in there 20 years, nothing happened.
We got
So
to
I-
use this now.
yeah, and then it came up, we need to use this. So I think it's something that we need to say. And then my other question that I have is the administrative code, since this is all done by council, something that council could do now that does not require to be put in the charter? Administrative code is already addressed. And then if we already had an administrative code under the optional code, under the optional charter, council could have developed an administrative code.
Well-
And then we could have said, well, we want these items in there.
There's two different things.
Okay.
So, in this particular case, with what you're doing with home rule, the
Right.
administrative code is replacing the third-class city code.
Right,
So the third-class city code, when it's referring to an administrative code, is not referring to the same administrative code that we're talking about here in the charter. It's talking about a code of ordinances, it's talking about the laws that the city wants to adopt. The charter is directing that a new law, i.e. to replace the third-class city code, be created and adopted.
Okay.
Now, the third-class city code and optional charter law, both of which are married,
Right,
rather lengthy pieces of legislation,
right.
cover a multitude of areas. And, I'll defer to Pell, but I believe the standard amount of time that's in most charters for getting the new administrative code adopted is usually between 18 and 24 months. The goal would be to get it done sooner. But there's going to be a lot of work that's done on that. It's not, a two-day job to draft
Right,
an
I
administrative
understand.
code.
I understand that. But most of the charters that you gave us say a year to 6 months to a year.
To Barry's point, we're saying no later than 18 months,
Okay,
and it is a lot of work. And
I understand.
Many cities that I've worked with, or even small boroughs, have hired specialty
Numbers.
firms to develop it, because you have HR rules, you have
Mhm.
accounting rules.
procurement.
It's an all-encompassing document, and I don't know that it's that easy to put together in like 6 months.
Right,
Because it really is important, and it's an ordinance. The better job you do preparing it, the easier it gets through council.
right,
So I don't think 18 months is terrible.
right.
And if you need it more, but no less than 18, no more than 18 months.
Okay,
Otherwise, you're back to your form of government you have,
right, right.
or the rules of the form of government you have.
Okay. And I think, as a selling point, everyone wants us to sell this charter. And I think if we're putting things in like ethic codes that I think would impel people to want to vote for it, because we're addressing some of the issues that have their concerns. I think to tell them, okay, we're putting this in the charter, and a year goes by and it's not enforced and nothing happens, because they haven't even written it in there. So we're developing a document that's going to take a year and a half even before anything happens. And so I don't want that to be the selling point if that's the situation, that it's going to take 2 years for the things that we want in this charter to take effect. Or
I
18
think
months,
the
I'm
ethics is
sorry.
12 months.
Yeah, the proposal
Yeah,
on the
a
ethics
year,
code
a
is
year.
12 months.
And that's
right.
what I was thinking, a year here too.
Yeah, yeah.
I was thinking a year here too.
Yeah.
But we're saying not more than 18
18
months.
months,
It can
okay.
be done.
Administrative code.
All right.
Administrative code can be done early.
I will say, while it seems like we've been doing this for years and years and years, we've been here for 14 months now, which also went in a New York minute. I mean, it's from when we first sat up there the first night to now, really does seem like yesterday. So, I always worry about, well, we want to do it even faster. I would much rather we do it right than faster.
Right.
The actual charter writing started in January,
Yep.
Yeah.
so it's within this year.
Mm-hmm.
I would just also like to say that the writing of the administrative code, public outreach and engagement is going to continue to be important. And I think everyone at this table should help ensure that people are engaged in paying attention to the development of the administrative code.
That's why I want to go to transition. Hold that thought till transition.
Yeah.
Okay?
We can talk about that a little
We
bit.
want to talk about
And-
transition.
Could I also say to that point, in hearing comments from the public this evening, in thinking that this is the first time we're talking about redistricting, when in fact, we talked about it very early on, and it was repeatedly recommended that we talk about it later, and later, and later. So related to informing the community, for anyone to think that we haven't been doing so much of this work before January, is kind of sad.
Yeah, it's not
It's
rushed.
sad.
It hasn't been rushed.
Right.
So if we could put administrative code to bed there, so to speak,
I think so.
and we'll move on consensus of administrative code, what we have, then I'd like to go to transition, although transition is really an article that tends to not be completed till everything is completed. But there are some points we wanted to bring up on the transition, what a transition article does to affect the charter.
Okay.
Because you're moving from one form of government to the other relatively quickly, over in a weekend or so over in January, there's got to be a way to transition between the two forms of government. So there's some technical things in here, such as the purpose of the article, why we're doing it. It's orderly procedure. That's why you're doing it. 1202, or actually it's 1302 now, I apologize for that, but it's going to be 1302 when it's done. The effective date will be January 1st, although some of the terms of office start on, you'll see throughout it, January 2nd or the holiday, but it will be effective on January 1st. The current elected office holders, their positions will remain in office. They were elected to that office. They will remain in that office for the remainder of the term for which they're elected. However, if they vacate it, then the charter will determine the replacement, okay? The person won't be replaced to a term that was under an old form of government. It will be under the charter. Initial elections is determined on your council makeup, and that hasn't been decided. 1205 effectuates the abolishment of the treasurer's position and where the treasurer's duties will be housed. So that's transferred to Department of Administrative Services. The treasurer also stays in office till their term is expired. And the same qualification, if they leave, then the vacancy is not filled. So if the treasurer does vacate the office, then it will not be filled because there's no treasurer's office to fill. The salaries of the elected officials are continued at the same rate they are when the charter becomes effective, and you have provisions to change that by ordinance for the next batch of elected officials. All authorities, boards, and commissions are continued. There's no interruption in their duty, their authority, their power, even though it's under a charter now and they are authorized under a third-class city. Everything as far as their duties stays the same. If there are vacancies, they will be filled by provisions of this charter. So requirements that you put on with this charter will then take effect for vacancies. Transfer of functions is a technical thing, so that anything abolished by the charter, its functions are transferred to the agency within the charter, for example, the treasurer, or if no such provision, the ordinance abolishing the agency, which is what we just went through with the ordinance section. An important point is personnel are unaffected by the adoption of a charter. No one's salary, no one's tenure, no one's residency, no one's health care insurance, retirement or pension benefits, employment or collective bargaining agreements, any leave with pay, or any other personal rights. Nothing in the charter will diminish the rights and privileges of those employees employed or any former employees in their pension or retirement benefits. So you're protecting employees in the transition period.
And the former employees is just by law.
Yeah, they have whatever they retired of. You can't change it anyway. But this puts it in writing, that there's no question, if you're a former employee, your pension is unchanged, your retirement benefit, if you're a current employee, your situation's unchanged as of the effective date of the charter. Going forward, can always change, but you're not going to lose any rights you earned as an employee. I'm not overstating that, right? Sister, that's, employees are protected. Competitive test, there's an exemption, so if there's if you're in a position in the city and for some reason there is a competitive test, you are able to continue in that position without subject to a competitive test. 1209 is legal continuity, simply says that all ordinances in effect at this time will remain in effect. They won't have to be reenacted. When the city becomes a charter city government, everything stays the same until changed by terms of the charter. Okay, all legal actions remain the same. Property is transferred, all that good stuff. And the qualification on 1209B is that we tie that back to the administrative code article. It reiterates that under the transition, until there is an administrative code, because this is to your point, Ms. Byrd, until there is an administrative code set in the 18-month limit, you're operating under the third-class city code. So there's no gray area. Until there's an administrative code, you are a third-class city, similar to what you are now, and under the optional plan. Once the,
And I think that's.
you are under,
What you, I
yes.
want to clarify.
Yeah, you're not.
You are a home rule
Yeah.
municipality, subject to all the rights and privileges of a home rule municipality. What this provision is saying is that, except as modified by the charter. So the charter has already made changes to things that are in the third-class city code and optional charter. There are lots of things in the third-class city code and optional charter that that govern operations of the city that aren't addressed in the charter. For example, what are the laws regarding procurement? What are the laws regarding bidding? What this provision is saying is that while you are now a home rule municipality subject to those provisions, until the administrative code is adopted, will act and continue to act under the laws and procedures required by the third-class city code as modified by this charter. So where it's been left open for council to do, we have to do it. Where we don't want a period where we don't know how to operate or under what rules to operate, which could lead to things that this commission wouldn't want. Right? So that provision is meant to assure that the same checks and balances that are in place today legally remain in effect, but you are given that's where I wanted to just clarify, Jerry.
No, I
You
agree.
are clearly given the status of a home rule municipality.
I was a little careless with that because I gave the impression that you were still a third-class city.
No.
You are not. After the effect, but you have a fallback to stop any arguments of what are we operating under until the administrative code. The
Right.
charter governs.
Right, and I think that's when we talked about the administrative code, I read that when we talked about
Yeah.
the transition, and that's why I was saying 18 months is a long time, because a lot of this stuff
Yeah.
is not even gonna take effect. So, and even over budgeting and stuff we put in there, while the administrative code, we will put it in the administrative code, but that don't even happen for 18
But the budget section does control the budget under the charter
As
without
far
the
as-
administrative code, as far as the article that you've all written.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
So-
This
so
is your
some of
safety
So
net.
for example, Ms. Byrd, the currently, council does, under the third-class city code, a budget cannot be presented until the first meeting in November.
Right.
Okay. The charter that you're proposing, the language that's in the charter already,
Right.
significantly changes that entire procedure. Creates a capital budget process, creates all sorts of things that don't exist under the third. Those will be in effect if this is approved by the voters immediately, not waiting for 18 months.
Okay.
All right, temporary ordinances, that just gives the ability to enact ordinances that will be repealed at the end of 18 months. You may need some temporary ordinances to bridge the gap. I don't know which they are, but if you need to do them, you have the authority to do them, but they are term limited in the sense. They are limited to their effectiveness. They automatically stand repealed at the end of 18 months. 1211 is mandatory adoption of certain acts. The ethics code will be adopted. It says within 18 months, I think the Ethics Code Commission wants 12 months.
Right.
We'll have to work the language so that notwithstanding other articles,
Okay.
at least 18 months, they will have the administrative code and they will have the ethics code. So you got
Both.
both places, okay?
Okay.
So they'll be in both places. And any other ordinance, rules, and regulations deemed by the charter or the transition committee. There is a delay of certain charter requirements. This is a holder. This is kind of a holding place depending on future decisions by the Budget and Finance. If there are revenue limitations under the Budget and Finance, they will be in abeyance for 2 years because you have to have the Budget and Finance article take effect. The charter starts at the beginning of a budget year. So for 2 years, the will be waived as approved by the majority vote of council. You follow what I'm saying? You don't want to hamstring the current budget
I
by.
don't follow.
Well, okay, yeah, the current budget that's going to be adopted
Right,
under the
understand
old
that.
system
Mhm.
will stay in effect, okay?
Right.
Okay, then the following budget is a mayoral year,
Right.
okay? And that can get changed. So we're saying for those two periods, those two budget periods, any limitations on revenue growth or things that would cause trouble for the adoption of those two budgets will be waived when they adopt the annual budget. So it's a little complicated because of the transition time, January 1st of the charter, and then we're going to have a mayoral election and a council election. And remember, when that happens, you can reopen the budget. Well, that's under the Budget and Finance.
Right.
The new councilman, new mayor has the authority to reopen it. So putting limits on for the next 2 years is tricky. Now, they can have the limits, they can listen to the limits, but it may not be possible to enact the budget in those circumstances. The third year, the third budget under the charter, for sure, everything stays in place. You follow me? Because everything will be in place. This is something we thought was necessary because of the two budget periods overlapping each other.
Right. And so for tax increases, if we increase the earned income tax and transferability tax, that'll all take effect as of when this gets passed, when the charter gets passed?
Well, it depends on if it's in the budget or not. And yeah, if the charter, once the charter is effective, then the tax flexibility under the charter takes effect.
Okay.
But you won't have that tax flexibility until January
For this,
1st.
Right.
So you got to get a charter, you got to get a budget in place.
So it's not gonna.
And that'll be under the third-class city code budget rules. It's only for this transition period. That's why the transition article gets a little funky. Now, the transition is governed by a transition committee. And the transition committee begins on January 1st, 2025. And before that, assuming an affirmative vote in November, the transition committee will be formed of three, this is our suggestion. This is subject to discussion. Read it and think about it.
Okay.
Consisting of three persons with the goal of facilitating the transition. And the transition committee shall schedule regular public meetings to inform citizens of the progress of the transition. The membership is the current mayor or their designee, one member of the city council appointed by a majority vote, and one member of the what county are we in? Lancaster. All those L's, I started going down the list. Lancaster City Government Study Commission. One member of the Government Study Commission will be selected by the chairperson of the commission following certification of the ballot approving the charter. Those three people will be required, they will have city council requirements to report quarterly to the transition committee on council's progress on administrative code development and all the other things necessary, ethics code, other things that are effective in the charter. If there is a vacancy on the transition committee, the remaining members, so two of them, can fill, by a vote of those two, can fill a replacement for the mayor's appointment or the council's appointment. However, if the transition committee person resigns, only the former chair or vice chair shall be appointed. Okay, so there's no There's always going to be a Government Study Commission person representing the thoughts of the Chartered Government Study Commission. So, and that will not get paid, and presumably it will be terminated at end of 18 months.
Right. Whenever.
You'll have no other obligation.
Or sooner.
Or sooner, within. Okay, that is the transition, right? Did I miss anything?
The only thing I would add is that the meetings of the transition committee would be public meetings under the Sunshine Act. They would be public with the intent of receiving public input. The transition committee would report progress and citizenry would have the opportunity to ask questions.
Okay, and that, I think, concludes us.
And it's just after 8:30.
Ethics.
Oh, ethics, well, the
We skipped
committee,
it.
well, we have, but we don't, that was just provided. I don't know how you
Okay.
want to handle ethics.
Yeah,
Mr. Feldman just did say we could present it, I don't know if
I don't want to present it.
we can wait.
Do you want to present it?
Sure, I can present it. So one of the things that Commissioner Tony and Commissioner Feldman and I thought, that the establishment of the Ethics Commission, the City Council by ordinance shall establish an independent Ethics Commission in its regard with education, investigation, and enforcement of the city code. So we all agreed on that the purpose of the ethic code would be for education, investigation, and enforcement. There was not a lot of discussion about it that was presented. The terms and the qualifications, we did have some discussion on that. We agreed the terms of 5 years. And the commission shall consist of 2 members appointed by the mayor, who members appointed by city of council, and 1 member appointed by the city controller. And that, I think we had questions about who should appoint the ethics committee
We did.
in discussion.
I did, was it 3 years or 5 years? At least,
It says 5, but I can check my notes.
because that up there says 3.
Yeah, that's just, I was just reading what he presented. I didn't want to say something
Okay.
different.
Yeah.
He presented 5, but I think we did have discussions about 3, but yeah.
City residents.
It was 7 city residents, yes.
Yes. No member of the ethics committee during their term of service may hold elective or appointed office under the city or any other government or hold any political party. Members of the ethics commission shall maintain city residency throughout their term of services and shall forfeit their office upon cessation of city residency. Any member of the Ethics Commission may be removed by the mayor with the consent and vote of a majority plus 1 of city council. Any member of the Ethics Commission may be removed, I just read that. Any vacancy that occurs in the Ethics Commission will be filled for the remainder of the vacating member's term by the mayor, president of council, or city controller with consent of council. We had a lot of discussions on the terms, and we didn't really reach, but we talked a lot about who should sit on that committee and coming up with a list of people so that, you want to...
Basically, like, we talked about taking applications in,
Right.
not just necessarily ad hoc appointments, like people being interested in applying in that application process, giving us the opportunity to vet the history to ensure that
Right.
they have adequately fallen outside of their last political action, essentially, or political contribution in any sense. So that was some of the discussion we had there.
Right. The adoption of the Code of Ethics within 1 year of the effective date of this charter, City Council shall adopt and enact by ordinance a city code of ethics which shall apply to all elected and appointed city officials, officers of the city, and city employees. Within this initial adoption of the city code of ethics, the mayor, with the consent of council, shall appoint a member of the commission to a term of 1 year, a second member for a term of 4 years. The president and council, with the consent of council, shall appoint a member of the commission with a term of 2 years, and a second member of the commission for a term of 5 years. The controller, with the consent of council, shall appoint a member to the commission for terms of 3 years. For a term of 3 years. The Code of Ethics shall provide that no city elected or appointed official or city employee, whether paid or unpaid, shall engage in any business transaction or shall have any financial or other private interest, direct or indirect, which is incompatible with the proper discharge of the official's duties in public interest, which would impair the independence of judgment or action in the performance of their official duty. Prohibited actions, and I don't think he made the changes to this. We discussed this, and adopt the Code of Ethics shall provide for the investigation of the use of public office or position or privilege gained. No elected official, appointed officer, or employee shall act in any official capacity on matters in which the employees or official has a private financial interest clearly separate from that of the general public, accept gifts and other things of value in return for a favorable decision or vote.
Yeah, you're reading a printed copy, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, there's definitely.
He did put that change in there.
So,
This is the most recent from Mr.
yeah,
Sullivan.
I was like, there's some differences. Okay, so
This is the
I'm
one
looking at
dated
this, so I'll just.
Just read it
I'll
because
just
you were
read-
there.
This is 7/6.
So A, act in an official capacity on matters in which the employee or official has a private financial interest clearly separate from that of the general public. B, accept gifts and other things of value greater than de minimis in return for or as a reward for a favorable decision or vote. Act in a private capacity on matters dealt with as a public official or employee. D, use confidential information for personal gain. And E, appear before city departments, offices, and agencies on behalf of private interests.
And we had a discussion about $100 or something. We put a value on any gift they could receive.
We did have discussion, but I don't think we had an official consensus, and that's why he added de minimis in there, because
Okay.
we're trying to acknowledge that, like, going and getting a cup of coffee is different from
Right.
going and get a bar of gold. Like,
Right, right.
we need to think about these things in terms of how we operate as a society in general. And another addition was actually the in return for or as a reward for, because there was some recent case in a Midwestern state, I
That you
believe.
brought up.
Yeah, so we just wanted to make sure it was really reinforced, like, you're not supposed
Before or after.
Before or after,
Right.
yes.
Right.
So 5, powers and duties.
Supreme Court said that.
Insofar as possible under applicable law, the Code of Ethics shall authorize the Ethics Commission to A, provide for the education and conduct in compliance with the Ethics Code that minimizes violations or the potential for violations of the Ethics Code. B, provide for citizen education on the requirements for public servants under the Ethics Code and increase citizen understanding of public service as a public trust under the vigilance of city residents. C, issue advisory opinions on Code of Ethics compliance as requested by the mayor, city council, city controller, appointed officials, officers, and employees of the city or any party with standing under the adopted Code of Ethics. D, provide for procedures to conduct investigations on its own initiative and on referral or complaint from officials or citizens. E, subpoena witnesses and documents. F, refer cases for prosecution. G, hire independent counsel. And that's just in part so we can really reinforce the legs of the stool there, making sure that this isn't just something sitting on the table.
Right.
So the last piece, I believe, is yes, funding of the Ethics Commission. The City Council shall annually appropriate sufficient funds to the Commission to enable it to perform the duties assigned to it and to provide annual training and education of citizens, city officials, and employees and candidates for public office regarding the Code of Ethics. And the funding is important because something without funding essentially doesn't exist.
Right. And we talked about the training, what type of training they would get, because we had a long discussion about that the Ethics Commission would be trained and we would be training the employees, and what will we be training them was the question. And we need to identify that, to put that in the ethics code. We didn't
Has
get
this-
there.
Has this had a legal review?
I had no.
Not yet, okay.
Oh,
So we'll
okay.
be discussing it again the next time.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
that's a good
This was coming out-
summary.
This was coming out of the
Yep,
committee
yep.
without
Work, you
having a
guys.
consensus of the commission, or from what I understood, really a final version.
No, this was just, yeah,
So I.
it wasn't
it's not been
finalized.
reviewed.
Okay,
I don't see anything in reading it off the top of my head that is objectionable or legally problematic. Using the word de minimis is good because that's a term of art in the legal world and has been interpreted with the State Ethics Act many times. So
Okay. So we'll talk about this next second.
Yeah, and we
It's good
did,
work, you
and
guys.
just to bring up another issue, we did talk about if complaints are filed by the police, would they automatically go to the ethics? And we didn't get to finish talking about that because time
Okay.
lapsed, but that was
I
another
would note that
discussion.
You need to be careful with complaints about police. There are mandatory federal requirements the police have to
Right.
follow for those, and it can't be subverted without a court order.
Right.
So.
Okay. Oh, so we're done with part six, item 6?
We are done,
All right.
Mr. Chairman. Our intent is, as Mr. Cross indicated earlier, is to package all of the articles that we have into one document over the next week and provide that to you.
By the beginning of next week.
Right.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yep. So I think we're going down the home stretch at this point.
Thank you all for plowing through this.
We're going to be reviewing for consistency of language and trying to fine tune some things, but, I think we're in pretty good shape
Great.
at this point.
All right, moving on, subcommittee reports, Public Engagement Committee.
We are building the tracks as the train is coming down the road for the information sessions that are happening on the 29th at 6 o'clock here at City Hall. On the 31st virtually at 6:30. August 6th, again, 6 o'clock here at City Hall.
What was that third date?
Pardon me?
What was the third date?
August 6th.
August 6th.
Those events have been created on the city's Facebook page. We have an invitation going out by email, hopefully tomorrow. We have assigned both city staff and members of the Public Engagement Committee to invite certain stakeholders and to ask those stakeholders to invite their constituents. And so, we're just, we are kind of behind you guys trying to build a presentation that hopefully is only 20 minutes long, some time for Q&A, and then the goal is to have some stations around the room for informal conversations. The stations will be structured around the charter table of contents, so like the articles. And we're working on a comparison document, so what the current law is now versus what we're proposing. And as you can see, some of our decisions aren't quite made, so that is something that we're going to be working through in these next 7 to 10 days.
Ms. Rufo, if I may add one thing for the commission members.
Can hear you better.
And I'll give you an email on this. This is, under Sunshine Act purposes, this will be an information session. It is not what I described to you at the very beginning of our process, 14 months ago, 13, 14 months ago, as a public meeting. But that means that you will need to govern yourselves accordingly, that no deliberations can take place, which means you shouldn't be giving your personal opinions on things that will yet come before you. And I will remind you that the entire charter has not yet been voted on, so that the essentially opinions regarding what shouldn't be in the charter, things that could come before this commission at a subsequent meeting sometime in August, you should caution yourselves not to go into that path, because then you would be deliberating and perhaps then we would have Sunshine Act problem. This is really meant to give information to the public and for you to receive input back from them.
Right.
And that's the design of it. I know Ms. Rufo and her committee have been very conscious of that, but I know that many of you are going to be participating, and I wanted to make sure I expressed to you, again, my job as I view it here is to protect you. And so think about that before you go, because you want to make sure you don't inadvertently cause yourself a problem because of the nature of the session.
So to that point, before the first information session, I'm working with Millsy to provide some guidance and sort of training, because we are listening. We are not and facilitating conversations. We are not giving our opinion. We're describing this is what's currently in the charter through the presentation. Then we are hearing what citizens have to say to us, answering their questions, and then we're going to the stations to listen and document what they're telling us so that we can use that information, plus the public hearing, which is on the August 8th is the public hearing. Use that information to make any final changes to the charter before we vote to put it on the ballot. So a couple things. On the 29th, so far, there'll be 5 of us. I'm assuming you're coming to them, but you haven't filled out. Okay.
My July schedule is like.
Okay, so on the 29th, there are going to be 5 of us. On the 31st, which is the virtual one, there'll be 4 of us. And on the 6th, there'll be 5 of us because you signed up today, right? Yeah. So that's where we're at. And we're also going to the San Juan Festival. We have every slot filled with at least 2 of us, with the exception of, I think, the 27th between 6 and 9. So, Tony, you can take a break on the 27th.
You think I can do that?
Yes, I think you can do that. This week, we had several presentations. We went to the Downtowners and the Downtown Merchants
And West Lancashire Jewels.
and West Lancashire Jewels. So that's where we're at with that. Sorry, it was really long.
No, thank you very much. Any questions for the public engagement? Okay, I assume there's no additional report from the Ethics Committee. Mr. Feldman's not here. Do either of you have anything to add? Anybody else on the Ethics Committee have anything they want to add other than what we already discussed?
It's looking good.
Okay. Budget and Finance, Mr. McGrath?
We had our most recent meeting last Monday. Our focus was on 3 items. One was the idea of a year-over-year total revenue limit. The other was around the exemption level to exempt taxpayers from paying taxes. And the third was around procedures for how council handles and responds to public comments and questions that come up during the budget approval process. So we have our next meeting this coming Monday, and we'll continue and resolve those items to the best of our ability, and hopefully that can be our last meeting.
Great. Boy, do I like the sound of that. Any questions for Mr. McGrath? Okay, thank you. City Council?
Yeah. So, over the course of the last few weeks, this subcommittee has met 4 times. We met once for ground setting and 3 times in the neighborhoods of the city. These are the rough attendance counts for each meeting. There were between 22 and 25 at Bethel AME, between 6 and 9 at St. Joe's Church with SOWE, and 6 to 9 at the Lancaster Cemetery with North and East Neighbors United. I don't know if any other subcommittee can claim to have this level of attendance and interest. Many of these meetings we have at City Hall don't see attendance like this, especially what we saw at Bethel that day. It has been a very positive and inspiring experience. However, at this point, we have paused our work because I felt we had hashed out a series of concerns to provide a baseline of issues we need to work towards consensus on to inspire hope. The current draft in your possession is essentially an addendum to this report. We discussed far more than just districting. We discussed term limits, compensation of council, and maybe even most importantly, the inclusion of technology standards to make the functions of government more accessible to people in the 21st century and beyond. I do expect us to have some continued debate, but I want to be clear. It is the content of this article of the Charter that both inspires me most and gives hope to others who are unfamiliar with the pulleys and levers of government. I think of a great Lancaster statesman every time this article comes up, Thaddeus Stevens. I ask myself every time I approach this article, what would Thaddeus Stevens do? And given that he lived in a time where some leaders prioritized the financial well-being of the government and landowners, and that was because of the compromises made to establish this nation on land that was already governed, I think he would be encouraging of the conversations and product of this subcommittee we have had. While I recognize the issues of his day were different than the issues of our day, there is a level of connection between those issues and the sentiments of some today. We are all subject to the context we live in. To the public, I have not only listened to your concerns, but I've also heard them and processed them. I even made an alternative map from our conversations in the Southwest. I consider and reflect on your input daily. I understand change carries some level of anxiety. Change is hard, and this home rule procedure is a less than 2-year process. But I encourage you all to consider the draft we have put before you, because I believe that it pushes us towards a charter that we can vote for, not simply out of financial worries and fears, but vote for it in the light of a sunrise to the new day that can shine on Lancaster. I want to feel like I can say to all the people of the city of Lancaster without reservation, look, here comes the sun.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions for the city council committee?
So did they give them?
They all have, it's in the folder, we all have a copy of
Okay.
the draft as it's written, and I would expect that at our next meeting, we'll be discussing it.
That would be on the agenda.
So,
That's what I was wondering too.
that, yeah, we're not going
But
to
you all have
discuss any of them
Today.
today. Why don't we talk about some of them, because it's going to be kind of lengthy.
Yeah, I would actually encourage the members of the commission to speak up on that instead of me directing them on that.
I mean, it just went out recently.
2 days ago.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how many people have had a chance to read it, review it.
I've read it. Anyone else?
The plan is for it to be on the agenda for the next meeting, and that'll be the main agenda item.
That gives us
That
time
and the
to look at
budget
it.
stuff. I think
Budget.
the final
think
will
That
budget-
should
take
be,
that long.
that won't
No,
take long.
budget
That should be pretty
and city
straightforward.
council is all that's really remaining.
And what are we with our schedule? I should know.
August, or July,
August 1st. We have
August 1st.
two meetings in August with a third on the 29th.
August 1st.
Our next
August
meeting is August 1st?
August
No.
1st.
Yep.
Then the public hearing, the 8th.
I mean, if we're going to have the full commission at our next meeting, which I think I mean, it makes more sense to me, makes more sense to me that we would continue that discussion
That
when
was our,
everybody's here.
that was our agreement months ago, that issues of the city council article would only be debated with the full commission present.
Now, I do want to say at this point, though, because of that, I think with the deadline we're coming up on, if people, and as we've already discussed in front of this body, if people don't show up, it's kind of like we're letting everybody know the next meeting, we're going to be discussing this. So if it's not a priority for you, then you don't have to worry about showing up. But if it's a priority for you, then you got to be here.
Right.
And I would hope we would all be conscious of, like, someone getting hit by a car.
Yep. All right, any other items for subcommittees? Any old business?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I could, I think, just one thing that is on the horizon, we've mentioned the public hearing coming up on August the 8th. I think there are a couple issues that should be resolved with respect to that, the location of that public hearing, and then moving forward to organize the public hearing.
Okay, so that's something I would be working with Mr. Hanwerger and Mr. Harris about formalizing it. I'm assuming that's the plan.
We'll schedule that for here.
Yeah.
We'll arrange for the court reporter. We'll take care of all the advertisement that's required.
Okay,
Very good.
so that's firm. Great, thank you, Mr. Redding. Any other business for the commission? Public comments?
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh.
Ms. Cook.
Yes.
So I'd like to add all of the conversations, the deliberations, and our communication with PEL, reviewing these articles, in hearing other public comments, with all of the articles that we're writing, and the idea that we only had to deal with the tax part
Yeah.
and the budget
Crazy.
part of this, there are, how many articles?
13.
And now, yeah,
13.
because we added one. There's 13 articles, and we had to figure all of those out. And I want the public to understand that that's what we had. We had to rewrite all of the articles. We didn't just have to talk about taxes and what that will mean, what the budget would be. That's a mayor's decision as far as what the budget's going to be. And that proposed budget with a home rule charter and without a home rule charter. And there's another one coming that is going to be an administrative with administrative changes. So that kind of information is already public. So to think that we, the commission, were to figure out the taxes, I think is, what's the word? The expectation of us, I think, must be misinterpreted.
Oh, you mean like people expecting us to set tax rates and things like
Yes.
that? Yeah, I think some people have approached this body as if like this is an arena to essentially chastise the existing city government. And no, we're just building a
Right.
system of government for the city government, regardless of the administration, to function through.
As guided by PEL, by
Yeah.
the way. So,
Good or bad?
So thank you. Okay. Any
that's it.
other business? Okay, now, public comments.
Yes.
Anybody would like to speak, please? Member, name, street, and if you'd limit it to 3 minutes, please. And you turn
Hi.
on. Yeah, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Marshall Miller, 700th block of 6th Street. I have a question, if that's all right. I was hoping to get some direct answers here. Along with your hearings around districts, was there a cost analysis of how much it would cost to form districts and then reapportion them every 10 years with census data?
There was not a cost to that, but what I will say is you've essentially given us a line item for another government of $20,000 for a reapportionment, which is actually a different process. It's a more complex process because that's where you add or remove districts. We've done this, I've kind of led the process of drawing up the maps on $0, and the city staff would be required to give support, assumingly from the GIS department, which is a function that already exists in the city government. So I can't imagine that it would exceed that $20,000 mark that you gave earlier.
So you drew up the maps. Has there been any legal analysis around whether or not these can be implemented?
We have used the tool Dave's Redistricting, which gives a real snapshot analysis. For example, one of the thresholds of the variance in population can't exceed 10%. All of the maps I've proposed, all versions, have been within that threshold. And even furthermore, like I had said in my report, based off the conversations we had in the Southwest, specifically the West Lancaster Jules part of town, I've drawn up even a second alternative to the map that addresses some of those concerns and even furthermore doesn't split any precincts. But that is something the public has not seen yet, nor was it sent as part of my draft to the commission.
So lawyers have not looked at this, though, with our consultants or anyone with city government. It's just been through an online tool.
An online tool which,
They saw it.
Okay,
Districts uses the tool.
okay, that's helpful.
Programs, yeah.
And then I guess lastly, on the districting question, correct me if I'm wrong, but the proposals that you put forward involve adding seats to city council, 2 more for a total of 9.
correct.
Have we done a cost analysis about what those additional city council members will cost the city?
Well, we know what their salary is.
Yes.
Do you have that total number on you?
We will when the time comes.
Well, yeah, that's to be debated by the commission, but the draft we put forward proposes actually an increase in salary for councilors to $12,000 because that adjusts it for inflation at, I think, 2004 rates.
Right. But we haven't discussed it
So
with,
it's not,
The
nothing
whole-
set in stone with the charter. Like the commission as a
away the
whole
house-
needs to have consensus
house
on
even.
what matters, every single item.
Don't tell it.
Okay, if I use my 3 minutes or can I ask one more?
Well, sure, please.
Okay, sorry. And then one of the proposals, there was talk about mandating minority party representation. Can you discuss that and what that means?
Sure, I'll dig into that a little bit. So basically, we live in a city where it's roughly 73% Democrats, I think 23% Republican, and 4% other. The fact that we are in a city government where no elected officials represent any of that Republican or other, I would say is a little bit of a concern. It's especially a concern for that 25% of people. So what the draft currently proposes is a system where all parties can run. Let's say hypothetically,
The subcommittee hasn't agreed with that, so.
well,
Okay,
That's your
so, yeah, so we should draw,
all right, yeah.
I think if the two of you want to talk.
yeah, I think we should move on. Yes.
Fair enough.
The subcommittee has not agreed on that portion
Right.
that he's talking about.
Okay.
They just let me put it in there for
Then we
us to
just let him
discuss.
have- Right.
Okay.
That's-
Okay, well, I thank you for your
Thank you, Mr.
answers and
Miller.
time.
Any other public comments?
You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
ethics.
Irene Grievous, 400 block of West End Avenue. I was just hoping that the commission will consider adding something to the charter to prevent or protect from disparate treatment, specifically with permits, building permits. It seems like it's very easy for certain individuals or certain contractors in the city to obtain permits, while others, like myself, it's almost impossible. And from just going to the Property Reinvestment Board, I'm noticing, and I've witnessed, city council members sitting as a city council member, but also being on the Property Reinvestment Board. And there is funding available under the Critical Repair Program, yet from going to these Property Reinvestment Board, I have yet to hear anyone, any of the inspectors or even members that are sitting on the board, even offering the funding that's available, either through ARPA or the Critical Repair Program, to help these individuals stay in their home. Instead, the efforts is to take the property away from them. And our elected officials are not, or public servants seem to be serving themselves. And that is very concerning and alarming. You bring it to the attention, you escalate it and no one's listening. You bring it to the city council meetings, but they do not have to respond, as they have not for me personally for almost 3 years. 10 permits later, it should not take me 10 permits only for them to be denied, to the point that I had to go and file a federal lawsuit. It's just disheartening, and luckily, I do have another home, so I'm not homeless. But others are not lucky as I am, where they're forced out of their home, and who purchases these homes? Or other investors for financial gain. You know, it's sad. It is very sad. So I'm hoping, you know, there's something in the charter to protect property owners. Because right now, our public servants, there's no policing. You can appeal, but who do you appeal to? The same people that are trying to force you out or take your property away. And I'm not the only one that's experiencing this. From going to the Property Reinvestment Board, I've seen it over and over and over and over again. They apply not for 1 permit, not for 2 permits, not for 3 permits. It's like it's a spinning of a vicious cycle that doesn't end until people give up and lose their home. But yet, contractors and special interests have no issue getting permits for basically the same thing. So we need to open our eyes and really hear the community that I feel is being ignored. And that's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, hearing none, thank you all. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Any objection? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
So